And now Steve is going to sing the Skeptic Bunch theme.
Steve sang it once, never again. Yeah,
that's true.
And by the way, I would be Bobby, wouldn't I?
Yeah, I think you'd be Jan or
Bobby.
Jill. What's the little kid's name? Jill? Jan? I think Jan.
No, it was
Cindy.
Bobby was on this.
Cindy.
No,
we talk about the Brady Bunch.
Cindy.
Yeah, he's
The Brady Bunch and Cindy.
I think Kyle is Cindy, and I'd be Jan. Is that
Well,
right?
that's just
Or do we the
stereotypical.
boys?
How dare you?
I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
you're assuming our
I think the
gender
boys
here.
Are on the
It's
left.
2018.
Maybe the boys are on the left.
Yeah, we could be anywhere we want.
welcome
It's
back.
2018.
Welcome back, everybody. This is the after show, the post podium for the debate between Dr. Nathaniel Jeanson and Dr. Herman Mays on replacing Darwin. Thank you for coming back and joining us. I figured we would begin with a really quick icebreaker, just to start the mood off right. We've got a ton of talent in this hangout. There's just almost so much going on here that we shouldn't even have to talk. We should just stand here and look pretty, or sit here and look pretty. But we've got John Perry from Stated Clearly, Paulogia, Trevor Valle, Dr. Herman Mays, Dr. Nathaniel Jeanson is back with us. I'm Kyle, I believe. Yeah, I'm Kyle. Aron Ra, welcome back, sir. And of course, Cindy over there, or Bobby, whichever you prefer. But we
Either.
So I actually just figured it out. It is the boys on screen right. I would be Greg.
Yes,
Of course.
I knew this because I watched every
That's
episode.
what I
And
thought.
I used to live around the corner and went to school with Robbie Rist, who played Cousin Oliver. So I watched every.
So Kyle
that
is
makes-
Cindy.
Kyle is Cindy.
Name dropping now, Steve.
okay, we've got it. Hashtag Kyle is Cindy. We get it. Okay, I'll put my hair in
Herman
pigtails
Mays.
tomorrow.
Herman Mays is the guy who says Marsha, Marsha, Marsha.
Marsha,
you
Marsha.
get hit with a football all the time. So
My nose.
you actually have the. But
Sure,
we
Jan.
figured like everybody in this room has been on our show at some point before and has engaged in debates, and we decided that we would, if we could pick the ultimate debate between some of the people in this room, what would that look like? Like, what would be the paramount to the greatest show with a select few of these people? So let's start out and see who we've got debating who.
Wow.
Maybe.
As the room goes quiet.
Yeah.
I was watching the whole debate between Dr. Mays and Dr. Jenson, and that was
Hey, can I start before we get started? Now that this is the after show, can people just call me Herman?
okay.
Yes.
Cool.
Okay.
Let me, and before we jump into the pieces of the debate, Dave, do we have that up?
I'm waiting with great
Oh,
anticipation
you
for
want,
these
you
matchups,
want the,
even though I know
the
what they are.
slideshow you sent me?
Yeah, the slideshow.
Yeah. Yeah.
Here we go.
Cue it
Okay,
up.
so we're going to start out
Look at
with Paulogia, and of course, this is an obvious one. Paulogia would be debating Vice Rhino because
So
of
basically,
the
debating
conspiracy that
himself.
Paulogia is actually Vice Rhino. So this would be the only way to figure that out.
He could do that with two mics and two
Alright.
monitors and two computers.
Let's find out who Trevor Valle would be debating.
I mean, I can guess.
Guess. Take a guess.
Eric Dubay?
Oh.
Oh, a cassowary?
No. a cassowary, of course.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
Well,
Mean
being
little
that
birds, aren't they?
I'm an evolved primate. It's still a dinosaur. Its toe claws are longer than mine. That would be a very unless I had my hockey gear on. Then
Well,
it would
and
be
it has-
good. It would be a
It has
good
the
one.
testicles, like the 70-year-old man testicles hanging from its beak as well. I didn't picture that
Yeah,
because
just
it's too
guard-
graphic. But
Just guard
you're
your
actually-
loins.
You actually look like that world famous
Ah.
paleontologist with
I don't
that
know.
cool beard. That's it out there. You know that
all right,
guy?
let's look at Aron. Let's take a look at who you would be, and this should be obvious as well. Aron has debated literally everyone, so the only person left for Aron to debate is actually God himself. So that should be obvious.
We've got
to
emails
everyone.
to God, so we're working on it. He hasn't responded back.
You
working
know
on
that photo
then-
that you're using, that was a campaign photo. Can you
I know,
guess
but
why
you look
nobody
sharp.
voted for me? I mean,
But the suit's
You look
awesome.
sharp, sir.
Yeah, very sharp.
Well, let's look at John
Aron was
Perry
the
now.
same
This is
scene
the
as
last
mine.
one.
God is more muscular than you.
The only other person that is infamous for having a bullhorn like that would be the one and only G-Man. A battle of bullhorns.
Battle bull something.
So, yep.
It doesn't surprise me
All right.
in the least. I mean, I don't know that much about G-Man. I didn't know that he had a bullhorn, but now that I see him with one, it makes perfect sense. Especially the way he's yelling into the camera.
He used it in a hangout.
He uses them in Hangouts, though. That's the thing. Not on the street. On Hangouts. He'll literally be blowing the bullhorn at his computer. But that's a whole other thing.
Oh,
let's hear from the... Yeah, I mean, it's special. That's all you can say. But to kick things off tonight, let's start out with the two individuals that actually had the debate and get their summarized thoughts of how it went, and then you guys can just jump in when you feel needed. Dr. Jeanson, do you want to kick things off?
Sure. I've never done a Hangout, so I don't know how this works. I'll just say, again, I'm very grateful for the opportunity, especially Dr. Mays. We discussed afterwards that many of his colleagues, I think, would discourage him from doing it. So just the fact that he was willing to is something I'm very grateful for. And also to Steve and Kyle for the invitation. Hope we can do this more, and that's really my main thought. Gratitude.
Dr. Mays?
Same thing. This is, like I said before, this is probably not an easy thing for Nathaniel to do, and I realize it's tough, and but he seems like a good guy, and I appreciate him showing up to discuss this stuff. Working good.
All right, now, guys, it's your turn. Who wants to kick things off from the panel on their thoughts?
I had a question.
Don't everybody jump in at once.
Here. Can you hear me?
Go ahead.
Yeah. Well, Nathaniel's still here. I'm wondering, why did you open with the history lesson? I guess I was hoping that we would jump in to a lot of the science, and I've read your book and a lot of that stuff. I was hoping to get right into the argument. So I guess I'm wondering what you were thinking in terms of the debate, in terms of why set up with 20 minutes of history first.
Good question. And I should say at the outset, I have 4 small kids at the house. So Steve said I'll do 15 minutes and I can go kiss them goodnight. There's a couple of reasons. One is, it might surprise people. I'll share an anecdote first, which might illustrate my attitude towards this whole question. So this was back when I was at the ICR. I was at a small junior Baptist college. So probably preaching to the choir. It's students who are only there for 2 years. And I gave basically, so it's a friendly crowd, and I just gave a dinosaur talk. I wouldn't normally do it because it's not my field, but this is just explaining sort of the young Earth worldview. And one of the guys came up to me afterwards and obviously distraught and said, this is the opposite of everything I learned in public school. What do I do? So I beat him over the head with the Bible. I said, just believe. Just kidding. What I did was I said, you could tell the guy felt like he needed to do a complete brain transplant. I said, you can't do that. You don't solve this issue overnight. And so my attitude coming in was, we're not going to solve this issue in 2 hours. This is not anything. It touches so many fields. It touches so many questions. Part of the reason I'm putting in religious philosophy stuff and what I say at the afterword is, no one can escape this. So maybe I'm different from many creationists, but I don't feel like this is something you can come in and lay down the law. I don't know that it's productive either. I guess we were discussing ahead of time. I was talking with Kyle this afternoon. I found last night's session really helpful, just to get a sense of what are we trying to achieve with the audience. And we do get into technical details. So I told Kyle, I said, if you have 2 physicists here discussing, so I'm a PhD, but I'm a layperson when it comes to physics. And if I watch it and they argue about the technical details, I'm going to go home and tell my wife, she'll say what happened. I'll say they argued, they disagreed, they talked about physics over my head, waste of time. Didn't learn anything. So my hope was we could maybe even make this the start of a discussion and go through the details step by step and hopefully have this be something useful for the audience. And with respect to the history, what I realized, so this is again born of the last 10, 11 months, for the creationist crowd. So most of the speaking I'm doing, most of the speaking we do is in churches, friendly audiences, and most of the creationist audiences to me, had no appreciation of this concept of testable predictions. So why does this book matter? I'm like, I've got to take a long time to explain where we've come from, where we're going. I think many people. So I had a lady come up to me actually after one talk. She said, "Yeah, I took science in the '70s. We're still talking about proof." So knowing that there's some creationists tuning in, knowing that there's a diverse audience, and really that's the main thing I want to communicate with the book, that we're in a different era where I've got predictions in print. That's what I want people to take away, mainly. No, so basically in a nutshell, my attitude is this is a big issue. I don't think you can solve it quickly, at least in a way that most people can follow.
So you started out in a Baptist college. You started out in a Baptist college, and then you were with the Institute for Creation Research, and then you're with Answers in Genesis. So have you been buried in nothing but lies your entire life, or was there a time before that? This is really frustrating.
So the Baptist college, that's when I was with ICR giving a lecture. Go ahead. So say that again. Sorry.
No, you go ahead.
So the upbringing is your question mainly, correct?
It's frustrating to hear somebody that has spent their entire lives immersed in this. I mean, when there's not a word of truth to it, nor appreciation of truth in it, that's very frustrating to me.
Aron, to be fair, I was immersed in it. I was immersed in it too. I grew up, probably had a very similar upbringing to Nathaniel.
I just have a hard time relating to that, because I mean, everything they tried to teach me about religion, I immediately recognized as a lie. I mean, everything. I mean, right down to the most basic concept that it is dishonest to assert baseless, unsupported speculation as though it were fact. That alone, that one rule. All religions violate that. That's all religions do, is cite facts that aren't facts and pretend to know things they don't know. That's what they all do. But that would be a lie in every other avenue of life. And so when somebody at the podium, what's that?
It has a function. I mean, people derive something from religion that, maybe you don't need or I don't need now, but people do derive something from their religious beliefs that serves a purpose for them personally. And I understand that aspect of it. And I can resonate with that, especially given my upbringing. So I don't think it's just like they're stupid and believe a bunch of lies. I think it's more nuanced.
It's not just that they believe lies. And according to the statement of faith on Answers in Genesis, they do know that it's lies. And they're believing it, they're making believe on purpose, because they have already rejected all the evidence there could ever be. No amount of proof will ever get them to admit when they're wrong. That's the unreasonableness of the statement of faith.
But I think it's wrong to characterize religion as, I wouldn't characterize the Answers in Genesis statement of faith as characteristic of all religions or all beliefs.
I would, because I've also read the statement of faith from the Institute from Creation Research, and it's very much the same thing. I mean, they phrase it differently. Every creationist organization phrases it differently, but all of them admit in one way or another that they will never concede when they're wrong. It's not about understanding what the truth is. It's about believing the required lie no matter what, and never ever admitting when you're wrong.
That's a different form of religion. That's all religions are not like that. All religious beliefs. I have friends who are scientists.
Name a religion that doesn't pretend to know things they don't know.
I mean, I have friends who are. I wouldn't characterize it as they're pretending.
Would you concede that every religion pretends to know things they don't know?
I wouldn't characterize it that way. I was going to say I have friends who are scientists.
Is there one that doesn't? Is there one that doesn't?
Let me finish. I have friends who are scientists who are Buddhist, and there's none of this kind of legalistic enforcement of belief in Buddhism. Buddhism has a wide variety of sort of different beliefs to it, and they're all very personal, and they're centered around how you treat other people and things like that. There's not a lot of like, okay, you have to believe this, and you cannot believe that in it. So I would say
I was married in a Theravada Buddhist temple. I was married in a Theravada Buddhist temple. And I was told in that temple by the teachers in that temple that I was not born, that no one was born, that no one can be reborn because we were never born the first time. And of course, I had to raise my hand and say, hey, everybody here has a birth certificate.
Well, why did you get married in there? Like, why did you get married in there? If you thought it was
because they had a pond and a pavilion and a pagoda.
I mean, it's beautiful, right? That's it. You just described what religion is. People. It had a koi
We found a
pond.
beautiful setting. We just had to remove the religion from it to use the beautiful
setting.
setting. We did not have them various.
Can I interrupt and ask Nathaniel a question?
We got a lot of alpha personalities in here. You're going to have to like just go for it.
Yeah. John wants to ask Dr. Jenson a question before he has to go.
Yeah, there's a question related to the debate, and it was one of the questions that I had when I was reading your book. It's not something I don't think talked about specifically, but Herman was, I think, getting at this when he was showing the similarities between sharks and dolphins, for example. I think it's fair to say that most people would see evolution as a design type process, right? Evolution can shape organisms to fit their environment. And we see that evolution has done the same thing to sharks as it did to whales. It shaped them to be really good at swimming. And a big problem that we've had in evolution is trying to tease out convergent evolution, which is evolution shaping two different lineages to do the same thing, versus actual relations, like actual lineages that are related to each other. That's been a problem in evolution. We've worked a lot to do that, and we've found ways to do that. And one of the ways is to look for similarities that are neutral, that have nothing to do with survival and reproduction in a specific environment, and see if those match up as well. If they do, we're pretty confident that they actually share a common ancestry. If those neutral similarities or neutral traits do not match, then we're pretty confident that what we're seeing is convergent evolution. So evolution has essentially designed these organisms to live in the same type of environment. And because of that, we can test whether or not something was designed, or whether or not it's actually related to the other organism that we're looking at. So when we look at these neutral mutations in DNA.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
What were you going to say, Aron?
I was going to interrupt because I'm a rude ass. Go ahead.
So my question is, couldn't you use these same things that we use to tease out convergent evolution versus actual family relationships? Couldn't you use those same principles to look for design versus evolutionary history?
Homology.
I would love to. The challenge is, I feel like so much of what I learned in molecular undergraduate biology is being overturned. For example, it's textbook science, third codon position is neutral. And I've got an increasing stack of papers saying, no, it's actually functional. The papers are talking about the third codon, third position being selectable. Yes, it's wobble, but you've got data from E. coli to humans showing that some human cells use a certain set of tRNAs for proliferation, other ones for quiescence. There have been all these, and so actually for undergraduate, we're working on RNA regulation. That was my prof's big thing. We're in chloroplast DNA, looking at RNA stability, that sort of thing. And I think he'd be very pleased with the way that field has exploded in ways no one could predict. Circular RNAs, enhancer RNAs, long non-coding RNAs. It's just, the list is ridiculously long. So I would love to have a tool that does that. I'm looking at the literature and saying, what you call neutral and what you call functional, this is getting really hard to distinguish, because again, things that we took for granted. So I graduated 2003 with a BS, and that's, anyway, so in whatever, 15 years now, these textbook concepts I'm seeing overturned, much to everyone's surprise. So that's the short answer.
You guys seem to be talking about two different things. If you're talking about comparing, trying to determine what is convergent evolution, what is a derived synapomorphy or a tapomorphy, then just remind you that evolution is a process of incrementally adding successive layers of superficial similarity or superficial differences atop successive tiers of fundamental similarity. So it's the successive tiers of similarity, the core, that determines where the relationship is. So if you look at the superficial differences, which a lot of people do, they look at the superficial surface features and imagine that that's got to be a relationship somewhere. And it was fascinating reading the 150 years ago, the way people proposed that sea turtles have beaks and they have flippers that look like wings, so they must have been more closely related to pterosaurs, and pterosaurs having wings must have been more closely related to birds. They couldn't draw the line to dinosaurs because they were looking at the superficial surface features and not the core similarities, which showed that it was that birds derived from dinosaurs. And that I think is the simple rule you have to follow with that.
Right. I think it's weird when you can use evolutionary trees within families, but you're not allowed to use them outside of families. That's the big jump that it seems like you're making in your book that I don't understand. I don't understand how you tease out that difference because. I'm
sorry, you were commenting on this book, and my apologies. I'll just back out.
Phylogenies work all the way back. If they work in a family in a family group, they work in an order and so on and so forth. I don't know why you expect them to stop working at some time.
By the way, if you want answers about convergence and things like that, a great book is this.
I love that book. That was fantastic.
He actually studied. He's very well known for studying convergence on these anolis lizards in the Caribbean, and one finding that they find that is sort of ties together this idea of common ancestry and convergence is that the more closely related two species are, if you put them in the same environment, they develop more similar convergence traits.
Yeah.
The more distant two species are, the more kind of superficial their convergence is. So if the more distantly related species are in the same environment, they develop they develop similar adaptations in a different way. But if two species are very close related, and they're in the same environments, they tend to develop the same adaptation in the same way. And that is just a beautiful example of how common ancestry ties in to this idea of convergent evolution.
It's really fascinating.
So I strongly recommend that book. It's a really, really good one. Not just about convergence, but about evolution in general.
People are asking for like a reading list. What we can do is if you guys send us books that you recommend, we can just put it right in the video description afterwards, and people can come back on this video maybe tomorrow and get those books.
Doing a lot of reading this summer.
Yeah, I see by your book pile.
Did you want to take this opportunity, Dr. Jeanson? It's been well over 15 minutes. I don't want you to miss your kids. It's up to you. I'm just letting you know that.
Yeah. Well, let me just
where we are time-wise.
Respond to John real fast.
Sure.
Without opening too many big cans of worms. Oftentimes, historically, in the creation evolution debate, the question of separate ancestry, common ancestry is the big driving thing, and I actually deliberately avoid most of it throughout the book. So let me lay out the short answer for this. So point one of the book is basically how can we, point one of the book is Darwin took a fundamental risk trying to answer a genetic question without genetic data. This is important because I'm arguing the only direct scientific record of ancestry is genetics. That's what's inherited. You have indirect things that are readouts, but anyway, we can discuss that. So that to me is where the question needs to be decided in genetics. So what did creationists do in the years before we had? Sorry, I thought I heard someone.
There's definitely.
What did creationists do in the years before? Okay, so what did creationists do in the years before?
Go ahead, Dr. Jeanson. We apologize. There's 8 people in the room. That's why I start getting a little lag.
You have to be.
Go ahead, Dr.
Jeanson. Go on.
So creationists used indirect methods. Hybridization was one of the main methods, and evolutionists have pointed out for many years. Sure, no one disagrees if two things can interbreed their common ancestor, but what does it mean if they can't? It's a one-sided test. This goes back decades. So this is not a useful criteria for determining separate ancestry, which is the big question from common ancestry. And that's been just left dangling for umpteen years. And so what I try to do in the book is use as a starting point for kinds, and I'm deliberately vague on what they are, because to me it's an open question that I think ultimately genetics needs to answer, and I sort of imply some answers to that question. To me, the kind is that which makes best genetic sense of the data, in short, and it's something that'll need to be resolved in the future as we get more sequences and more mutation rates.
I have one last question before you go on that then. Well, more to the question earlier, because I know you have to go, but I just to touch on that statement of faith. This is one question I've always kind of wondered. If you do have evidence that you think does contradict what you think would contradict a young Earth narrative, right? That does have evidence that these genomic lines go back way longer than that. I mean, almost 4 billion years of history. The statement of faith says no science can ever change the young Earth creationist narrative. That's what the statement of faith is. I mean, would you say though that if you found evidence that refuted whatever your hypothesis is in here, that did indicate overwhelmingly that the young Earth narrative is wrong, would you stand by the statement of faith, or would you say, you know what, I'm going to put science first?
That's a good question. So there's probably multiple parts of that. Dennis Venema asked a similar question, I think, in April 2017, saying, what would it take to change your mind? I said, there's a philosophical element, a religious element, a scientific element. And the religious philosophical element will be a whole other discussion for another day. That goes into my decision as to what I hold to ultimately. But scientifically, I strive to follow the evidence where it leads. If I found something that was contrary, that would probably mean, and I said, I think this is where it goes. That would be the end of the relationship probably here. But it's not the first time I've taken a stand scientifically. I mean, at AIG, you can follow my publication trail, the first paper I published, to see where I've disagreed with another creationist and connect the dots to why I'm at AIG.
With other creationists, as long as you don't disagree with answers in Genesis, because you've got to sign a statement, to become one of their people that you have to endorse the required belief system. So, right or wrong, your job depends on maintaining the status quo of what they believe over and above whatever the scientific evidence is. And the question for me is, for whatever reason, whatever the source of my job is, if I find evidence that implies that I'm wrong, I'm going to investigate that in earnest, because it matters whether I'm wrong or how right or wrong or am I, or about what I want to know, because for me, it matters that information be accurate as it can be. And the idea that you would even deliberate for a moment to say, would you prefer the fantasy over the fact, that question wouldn't even exist in my mind.
So just to clarify,
it's a fair answer, though. By the way. Go ahead. I just want to say, I think your answer was quite fair.
To clarify, when I came on board, no one ever asked me, "Are you going to agree to hide evidence?" I mean, I, for philosophical and religious reasons, believe that's the way it's going to turn out. But I like to think about.
I have looked up Answers in Genesis requirement. Answers in Genesis has posted online the statements that all of their scientists have to fill out, and that you have to have an endorsement from like these clergy and everything to verify that you are going to promote the Christian position.
That's not my experience. Mine was more, they're looking for people who have a Christian testimony. I mean, how many Christian ministries?
And that's exactly what I just said. So your experience is exactly what I just said, that they want to have somebody that has a Christian testimony. Even if that's wrong, you still got to give a Christian testimony.
They didn't.
Well, you can still find the science be, you still find the science be incorrect, and then still be Christian, obviously. I mean, that wouldn't change that aspect of it, right? I mean, so the only thing that would change is that he no longer could hold the position that the Earth is 6,000 years old, contrary to 4.5 billion years, because the evidence points to the old Earth. So I think that would have to change, but not
the forum that AIG posted online that you can all look up shows that you have to endorse this belief position. You have to sign your
oath it does say that, yes,
to promote that.
Yes.
Yeah.
Nathaniel, it feels
saying
like
to his experience, it doesn't.
It feels
does.
like you have a special position there at AIG. Would you agree that it feels like you're in a separate category than like Andrew and Georgia and some of the others, who have to be on camera a lot and do a lot of the things? It feels like they're giving you some leeway to do this book, and it felt like this book was going to be a big deal. Do you do you feel like you are a special case over at AIG? Because it seems to me like you are.
I don't think so. I was going to follow up what Aron was saying. My experience in hiring and so forth has been, I mean, AIG makes no bones about we're a Christian ministry, and so there's an expectation then that people walk the Christian walk. And I'm here wanting, because I'm a Christian by profession, and wanting to see that message advanced. And anyway, there's a whole religious element to this that I agree with, because I believe that, and I think if people are going to go out and say, I'm here representing Christianity, you better represent it.
Well, but you're not representing Christianity in general. You're representing this particular version of Christianity.
Version of it.
I mean,
yeah, and the difference in positions. The difference in positions would be that I have to promote the truth regardless what I want to believe, and you have to promote your belief regardless what's true.
That is what the statement of faith actually says. I mean, it literally says that there is no science that could ever, because you had talked about Popper's falsification criteria, which, by the way, as I understand it, is more deductive. But you cannot have that if the narrative is that if I find something that goes against the young Earth creationist narrative, the science has to be wrong, because that's what the statement of faith basically is saying. Right. The science cannot be right if that is what it's finding. That's not, and that's not how you objectively approach science. And you seem like a very honest person.
Except for one thing, he did say that he follows the evidence where it leads, and yet he's still a young Earth creationist. So I'm going to call bullshit on that. He definitely did not follow the evidence to young Earth creationism. That isn't possible.
Can I ask?
Well, everybody comes to their own conclusion, so I don't know. I don't want to go to argumentative on that.
Can I ask a question real quick before Nathaniel has to leave, because I know his kids are probably crying. I saw a video, Nathaniel. I saw a video where you were being interviewed, and I forget the woman who was interviewing you, but you were talking a little bit about your personal experience and things like that. And one of the things you said worried me a little bit, because you said evolution is a front for immorality. Did you mean that, or did you mean something else, or?
I don't remember the quote. I do know that people, was it Julian Huxley? There have been people who have endorsed saying evolution frees me to follow whatever morals I want to. I'm not saying that.
Do you think that anyone in this chat, do you think anyone in this chat holds that position, or anyone in this century holds that position?
Well, let's not berate him about it. I just want to know what he thinks. That's what you said? Because I've watched it several times today, and I just want to know if that's what you think, or you want to take it back, or you want to clarify, or what.
Oh, so my position is, and the AIG position is, can you be a Christian and believe in evolution? Absolutely. No one denies that here. And obviously what we mean by that is you can be someone with upright morals, endorsing the gospel, orthodox doctrine, all that. And
so would you regret that statement to some degree, that you said it's a front for immorality?
I'd have to see it in context. I do know that there have been people. What's that?
I can find.
Since it clearly
is
not.
Yeah, because I could tell you, none of us rely on evolution for our morality. So they're separate issues. I mean, to us, evolution is just established.
Evolution is where how we derive our reality, our morality, because we evolved as a social species.
Sure, I grant that. But
it's not a front for immorality. That's just a blanket false statement. That's not true at all.
Right. I'm getting there. Obviously, we all have our own different meta-ethical positions and our own normative ethics. But the reality is, yes, evolution shaped many of our moral codes, right? The way we have the ability to determine right from wrong. So, Dr. Jeanson, do you think that if somebody ascribes to that narrative, that because we know everyone in here will say without a doubt evolution has happened for billions of years. Would you say that just because we have that narrative, we cannot have morality as individuals? Because I know I'm a moral person, and I find with objective morality when I tend to error theory. I don't need a theological position to have morality. Would you agree with that?
Well, like I said, we've been saying for a long time that you can believe in evolution, be a Christian, and so there's It's not that if you believe in evolution, automatically now you're this vile person. I mean, I've got friendships with biologists.
The video is
what about
the Heritage of Truth. I can tell you where it is so people can look for themselves. It's on YouTube. You can search Heritage of Truth, Janine Dennis, and it's from October 20th, 2017. And you said on there.
Now I object to things like this because I mean I saw Ken Ham giving a presentation and says, you know, why are they losing so many people in the church, and he starts blaming evolutionists, you know, for whatever immoral causes they front and all of that. And that's absolute nonsense. I mean, the context of the entire presentation, he's just lying through his teeth. Yeah, I did a piece of it on one of my former videos.
Wait. I know hang on. We have to have Dr. Jeanson. I know he has to go. We actually have somebody wants in. We're going to be giving the link to that one person who's coming in. Dr. Jeanson, we do want to thank you. I know you stayed even longer than you needed to for the after show, and we do appreciate it. Anything you last want to say?
Much appreciated.
Yeah.
It's been a pleasure to meet you all, to hang out with you all. Grateful for it. Hope we can do it again. Thanks for your kindness and interaction. So have fun for the rest of the night.
Absolutely. Thank you once again for coming on. Really appreciate it.
And now you got to tell me how to get out of this because I'm technology dumb.
Just click the X. Unplug it. Unplug it.
Hey, kick him out of
browser,
there!
run away, something. Yeah.
No, don't push that button.
Yeah.
What does this
It
button
should be
do?
that you move your mouse cursor over your image, and you'll see there's down at the bottom there's a little red telephone receiver from the old days.
Got it.
Millennials won't know that that's a phone receiver, but we old people know that.
What's a phone receiver?
Thank you.
Good
night.
I am probably
one
I
thing.
Don't know, maybe Aron knows, but I'm the only person besides maybe Aron, I think, that probably remembers the 300 baud acoustic modem.
No, I absolutely remember that, and I remember Renegade BSs that you would dial into on them.
Do you remember the 2400 baud?
I'm going to hear from you, Trevor. You've been quiet all night. It's not like you.
I've just been kind of riveted watching this. It's been kind of cool, and well, nothing directly in my there he goes. Nothing directly in my specialty was really touched on. I mean, he mentioned dinosaurs, and I went, and then then he moved on. He
got
quickly.
off of
it. He seemed to be moving on.
I don't know how wide this is, but
sorry, go ahead.
There's definitely a delay. There's what I'm hearing.
There is.
Somebody finishes talking, and I jump in. Yeah, and then it like
it's
5 seconds later is when people hear it, and so I'm interrupting people when I don't mean to, and so that's
because there's 8 people in, and it's trying to get everybody's. But let me just say real quickly, we've got Dr. Cy Garte coming in, who is a theist that believes in evolution. So we're going to get kind of his take from being a fellow Christian and what he took away from.
Yeah, I just sent him the
thing.
link,
Is an entire.
They exist.
So what's the verdict among the Brady Bunch here?
As far
as
that
was. I thoroughly enjoyed it. You absolutely hosed him, and it was interesting to watch. Kind of like the Gish Gallop on Thorazine, though. It was like this, like instead of the Gish Gallop, it was the Gish like trot. Just like stretching out time and then avoiding the question and trying something new. It was very weird to watch that. It was like a slow motion train wreck on his side.
And I didn't hear where
John Perry
do the whole presentation over again, just in case. Hey, sorry.
1 second.
Go ahead,
John
Aron.
Hayes, I thought you showed great familiarity with your
Hi, what is up with that?
Somebody needs
Hold on, we got some
to
bad news now. Yeah, Cy, you've got just mute for just a second, Cy.
If there's
while we try to figure that out,
that's the sound that's going to be in it.
Yeah, John Perry,
we've had that before.
What did you think, John?
My thoughts on it were that I would love to I'd love to see something like this again where there's one specific argument from his book that you guys agree on ahead of time to go in on the details. And Yeah, maybe even share with each other ahead of time which papers you're going to be talking about,
Well,
or which research data in specific.
What he didn't understand, though, is the problem is he wanted to make it about what's just in his book, but he's talking about a topic in his book, which is speciation or population genetics. The problem is the way he talks about those things is he leaves out really important facts. So it forces something that's not in the book, and that's because he leaves it out. And so like this idea of coalescent times and genes, he doesn't really discuss that every gene you have has a different coalescent time, and some are older than others. And it's something that he, if he discusses it all, he kind of glosses over. So you're forced to bring that up because it's at the foundation of modern population genetics, which is the topic of the book. So
that's so frustrating. You talked about
thing that
this was you're arguing from absence. You're making the fallacy of leaving things out, but he only wanted to talk about the things that were in, so he wouldn't even address the complaint you had. That was a very clever workaround for him.
Yeah,
even though it was the overarching theme.
But do you think they would give him a chance to actually tell him, say what his hypothesis was, what he was going for? Because I mean,
he
again,
didn't want the chance, Steve.
That's what I see. That's what it seems like, because
he wanted to prove that Herman didn't read the book. That seemed to be his whole thing. He wanted to try and embarrass
Herman.
him.
Everything he brought up was in the book.
You didn't memorize my book.
Okay, he didn't know page number. The only page number I remember. The only page number I know was 247 or 248 because I wanted to ask him a question on it, but I don't remember what's on what page either. But what Dr. Mays was talking about was certainly in the book. In fact, the first 15 minutes of what Dr. Jeanson was talking about, I didn't even remember being in the book. I don't think it was it?
Yeah, I wasn't in the book at all.
No, not even close.
Okay, I wasn't sure if that was just me because I don't remember any of that stuff in the book.
No, and I checked with Shannon, like it's not in the book, and I pulled it up. It's not there.
Yeah, so why does he talk about what's not in the book?
Yeah, you don't hear me.
We hear you, but it's like.
Aron, what is your takeaway?
Okay, so what's really important is the question of where he publishes his work. Now, it turns out that Jeanson is a scientist who publishes in journals like Cell and Nature and Blood, but nothing about evolution. He publishes his own work in those peer-reviewed journals, but all his creationist evolutionary biology is published in the non-peer-reviewed literature called the Answers Journal. And the reason that's a problem, and this is important for anyone in the audience who doesn't understand how science works, is when you write a paper that's published without peer review, you can write anything you want. If you put the same material into a paper that goes to a peer-reviewed journal, a peer reviewer will say, everything you're saying may be true, but you left out the following several points, which are either well known or they've been published by other journals. Every scientist does this when they write a paper. They have to make sure they know the literature absolutely cold, because they know that some reviewer, some referee, is going to say, well, what about such and such that was published last year? You didn't mention that. And so what the clue is that people like Jeanson, and the same is true for Podium, only publish in non-peer-reviewed journals because they can get away with omitting huge amounts of material that any regular peer reviewer would notice and say, wait a minute, you're leaving out an entire area here that's germane to your argument, and therefore this is not valid. Because it's extremely easy. Go ahead.
Yeah. I would add too that when you say his actual peer-reviewed publications are in what did it say in his biography? Cell, Blood.
I actually have it here. Blood, Nature, and Cell.
reason there are 3 journals listed is because I'm pretty sure he only has 3 pubs.
Yeah,
in those
that's
3
true.
journals.
Yeah,
and
he works on
first author.
pieces.
He's not first.
No,
I think he's only first author on one of those papers, which means
that's right.
the other papers he didn't write. He just got on there as an author or doing work in the lab.
True, but my point is, he knows the difference between publishing in a peer-reviewed journal and publishing in. Yeah, and so he is never going to publish. He could not possibly publish the kind of work that he talks about that's referenced in the book in a peer-reviewed journal because of those omissions. That's a critical point.
Yeah,
and
no reviewer.
That's why people like Herman and I and any other scientists, we don't look at stuff that's not peer-reviewed because you just don't, it's not going to be complete. It's someone's opinion. It's philosophy. It's something else. But it's not rigorous. It can't be rigorous because if it were rigorous, you put it in a peer-reviewed journal, and that means that reviewers have the chance not only to see if what you say is correct, but to see what you didn't say.
Yeah.
But peer review is just a conspiracy to block out the truth.
They also
think that peer review means that their friends can review it, and hey, he's my peer and he's next door. He's read it. He said it was kosher. Must be.
In my opening statement, where I talked about how Newton said that if he sees any farther, it's because he stood on the shoulders of giants. That's a very important thing to say in science, because what that means is to do science, you have to be collaborative, and you have to build on the work of others. You can't ignore all that work and do anything of any worth. And then Steve Pinker has a similar,
with it, but you have to mention it. That's right.
You have to mention it, and you have to build on it. Sometimes building on it means changing it, that idea, or disproving it or something. But you have to reference it. You have to go on this process. And people who publish in creationism don't participate in that process. They put all their work in an island so that they can ignore everything else. And that's not, science is a very, very, it's not, people in the popular culture think of scientists as these lone geniuses, doing work by themselves in some secret lab.
Like in this room.
Very collaborative. It's very collaborative. Yeah. It's very, it's not.
So I saw an intelligent design. I saw an intelligent design video that was showing how these scientists are doing their research, and they have this. They have an agreement between them that they will only endorse whatever promotes the evolutionary view. And this I thought was strange, that the intelligent design people actually think that scientists, legitimate scientists, have this agreement that they will only endorse or support the required belief system. Isn't that exactly what they are doing and not at all what scientists are doing?
Oh, if I could have another model that explains the data better than evolution, you better believe I would. I mean, I'd be famous, right?
I'd like to see another model for the Big Bang. Please bring me one for the Big Bang.
And no scientists worth their careers would not do that. If they had a compelling case, that's what they would do. But you have to convince people. You have to participate in this process of convincing other people. You can't just do it by yourself.
Dr. Garte, do you think that he would have fared better possibly tonight if he would have maybe brought up ATP synthase? You think that would have?
He would automatically. It's an automatic win when you do that. Yeah, it's an automatic win.
Aron got that one right.
You know what? I think that was one of the few discussions on genetics where ATP synthase was never mentioned once. That's impressive. Yeah. Although you mentioned mitochondrial, but
this is a different.
Scientists in the room. Is there any time Is there any time in modern usage now that any scientific discovery would come out first in a popular book? Is that even conceivable? Forget evolution, all that kind of, or creationism. Would it ever come out first in a book? Is that even a thing?
Well,
interestingly enough, species did, didn't it?
The practice of science has changed an awful lot over the last 100 or so years. As a matter of fact, it's changed a lot over the last 200 years. That's why I mean, what we recognize as a theory in science now is not what they would have recognized as a theory in theory in the 1700s. Subtle difference. Basically, what we have now is that a theory is a hypothesis that has been effectively proven. We can never say that it's proven because that's against the rules. You can never say that it's positively proven, but effectively proven, at least in a colloquial sense. And so once that's been proven, it can't be unproven. So what we basically have is no scientific theory, no actual scientific theory has been disproved in the last 100 years, because in order to elevate to that level, they have to prove it already anyway. Does that make sense? I said in a colloquial sense because scientists would say it that way.
I thought it was surprising, and I think Dr. Mays picked up on it too, when he was talking about the hypothetico-deductive model, which is deductive, hypothetico-deductive model, and he was trying to say that it was somehow inductive. And I didn't quite grasp what he was going with that, because the whole purpose, correct me if I'm wrong, for the hypothetico-deductive model is to provide a deductive means to scientific methodology in replacing some kind of inductive scientific method. Am I wrong on that?
That's exactly right. No, yes, you're exactly right. And in fact,
so weird. I thought that was just confusing to me.
I don't know where that came from, but you know, Popper was famous for this, right? That he said science is only this deductive, falsifiable methodology, and that's it. And you know, he was wrong about that. But that's
I think deduction is important, but that's just me.
Yeah, that deductive experimental hypothesis testing approach to science is probably the most famous scientific method. There's more than one method that there is. And like, it goes back to Hume. So David Hume had complaints about induction in general. So this idea that he thought that deduction was just
mean there's a problem with induction?
It's new. Yeah, they just discovered it. There's papers on it too.
Well, I mean, that's one complaint a lot of scientists has is because there's certain people that get tied to the Popperian view of science as only being deductive, and it doesn't work that way. Science is a collection of methods that we use to test ideas.
To answer your question again,
but I don't know why he got that confused. He was wrong about it. So.
To answer your question, nobody presents a scientific theory in book form anymore. So somebody did try. There was a Perianon Senopathy tried to present what he envisioned as a theory of abiogenesis producing all separate life forms without evolution, and he wrote that in a book, and I can't remember what the name of the book is, but it was a complete piece of trash, which was funny because he was an actual geneticist who was on the Human Genome Project, and he wrote this utter garbage that every species of crab, for example, spontaneously generated from primordial ooze without any evolutionary relationship to each other. That was one of the preposterous things that he claimed in this book. And a couple of other attempts to avoid the peer review process of normally, you set out your arguments in peer-reviewed journals, and you wait to see how does the rest of the world respond to these. Does this have any validity? And the actual scientists in the room will correct me if I'm wrong in this. But one of the things that people did to try to avoid that was this one woman had suggested that she had found a new form of, I think it was a new form of archaea that was using, do I remember correctly, cyanide in part of its DNA? And I may not be remembering that right, but she didn't go through peer review for this because there was nothing to support that. So she used the popular press and put that story out in like news videos, interviewing her at Lake Mono in California, where she said that she discovered these. And of course, that blew
prior
up.
To the paper being released, Homo naledi was released via press conference.
Okay, but that's fine,
right?
No. They actually released that quite a time before the paper was published and all that. It was a huge because it was in conjunction with National Geographic. They decided to do a big publicity run for it first. I mean, it happens occasionally, but you see it happen more regularly with pseudoscientific aspects. On the rare time that it works with something that's actually evidence-backed, the paper's coming out shortly after. But it's just it's kind of misconstruing that only the bad is let out via popular channels prior to the research.
Yeah, I think and one last example.
Aron, what's your thing about
something about this is that there's the normal way of doing it is you get your stuff published in a peer-reviewed journal in a normal scientific journal, and then scientists talk about it. But if you try to do that and you keep failing, I know Lynn Margulis had trouble publishing her. She didn't have that much trouble, but she had her endosymbiosis paper.
She was considered a crackpot
for a while.
But so she had trouble getting published in a normal peer-reviewed journal, and writing a book on the side helped. Once the debates started going strong enough,
he was right.
What Nathaniel wants is he wants scientists to take some of his ideas seriously and test them, and he wants to eventually become a part. He wants his work to eventually become an accepted part of the scientific world, right?
Which is respectable, right? But look at Lynn Margulis; she was correct, right? I mean, so even though she went a different route, the truth will always rise to the top.
Correct about that. She was correct. She was correct about endosymbiosis. She made a couple of other comments that seemed the way that she's phrasing things were inflammatory. They were provocative, and they weren't.
She didn't help.
They didn't even follow to the point that she ended up being right about. Yeah. So she's basically saying that evolution fails. The fact that endosymbiosis is not an evolutionary process does not mean that evolution has failed. But it did give me, listening to the arguments that she made and the insightful way that, or the provocative way that she said them, the outrageous, like sensationalist way that she said it, I was thinking, no wonder Sagan divorced her.
All right. Well, how about okay? Let's take a lesser example. Like, for example, with Barbara McClintock and jumping genes. Was that something that was really accepted when she proposed that?
I think that was a little more well accepted. I mean, any idea, but that's how it should be.
For that as well.
But you should. That's the thing. You should have to fight for these things, and the more it sort of changes a paradigm, the more you should fight for it. So the more skeptical people should be. Lynn Margulis started to think that everything came from endosymbiosis. So she went off the rails.
She went overboard. She went overboard. No question.
So, but that's a pretty, when you have bold claims require a lot of evidence, and people should rightfully be skeptical of things the bolder they are. So the real story.
She of all people should have been literally intimately familiar with that idea.
Yeah, right. But
since it was her husband who popularized that phrase.
The big one is Alfred Wagner, who did plate tectonics. So Wagner had these ideas about plate tectonics long before we could ever really test them adequately. So it wasn't until decades after he was dead that we could actually go down. People went to the bottom of the ocean and go, "Ooh, the plates are spreading apart. It's real." And so,
that's absolutely.
So
I just want to get Trevor a chance to. I want to get Trevor a chance to jump in here because I want to make sure everybody kind of feel like they're being excluded here because,
Oh no, I'm good. Trevor, I said my thing about hominality, so. Yeah, no.
That was your big thing, hominality.
I don't.
Well, no, it's just.
Let me just get this.
We got a lot of
students,
by the way.
Oh yeah. Wait, what? Quiet? What?
No.
I thought you said quiet. No, I was just saying that every once in a while it does happen. It does happen that something like very public happens before the paper is published. Jack Horner did it with his garbage T-Rex is a scavenger thing. You had Backer was doing it with the Parasaurolophus horns. In paleo, it actually happens quite a bit because dinosaurs are sexy to the to the general public. And getting access to SVP is not exactly the easiest thing in the world. Pardon me, JVP. But I think
it's hard to keep this stuff under wraps too. When you discover something, because you want to announce. Like there's a mosasaur that was discovered just within a mile of my house, and it was discovered by a creationist school bus driver who thought the world was 6,000 years old and thought that dinosaurs were a hoax. And he was the one that discovered this mosasaur.
Surprise.
So you can imagine what a news story that is. You couldn't wait on the peer-reviewed paper for that story.
Well, he can still technically say dinosaurs are a hoax because mosasaurs aren't dinosaurs. But did he change his position?
Yeah, did he change his position?
Well, yeah, he thought the world was 6,000 years old, and so now he discovers a mosasaur. How do you? And remember, he's thinking that not just dinosaurs. They think that mammoths are dinosaurs, dimetrodons are dinosaurs, and so are plesiosaurs. So, that's his perspective.
Anything in Jurassic Park is a dinosaur. Of course,
it's a sticking point for me too.
When I'm the former lab supervisor of the La Brea tar pits, and I would do tours on occasion just to get out of the lab, and people would be like, "Oh, look at that dinosaur skeleton! It's a Columbian mammoth." Anything that is dead and anything that's a skeleton in a museum is a dinosaur to a unfortunately decent percentage of the population, and movies such as Jurassic Park and all that don't necessarily help because they think, oh, it's a dinosaur movie. Mosasaurs, pterosaurs, dimorphodons, all of that are all dinosaurs.
A wild turkey would be though, right?
Trevor, the best case against dinosaurs is that brontosaurus couldn't lower their heads to get water.
Oh yeah, that's right.
That's a fun one.
it would kill him, right?
There wasn't any brontosauruses anyway. It was all a hoax. They got a Camarasaurus and a Apatosaurus and just stuck them together and made up a new animal.
Oh, that's right.
Well, they all
evolution works, right?
But now,
you just take one animal, animals, they mate.
It just came back. The Brontosaurus actually is a valid taxon. Yay! So we have three of them, and there's actually two. There's two different species of apatosaur now that came out of that same paper, which was really exciing.
But they walk like this.
Who's most recently a young Earth creationist in the room. Speaking of Nathaniel's book, for those of you who looked at it, the packaging is so slick and the graphics are so great, and they spent so much money on
it's
this
a
book.
sexy book.
It is a very sexy book.
Would you guys agree that though the point of this book was not, maybe Nathaniel's point was to convince scientists, but I feel like Ken's point was to sell a book that someone who already believes this stuff would read 3 chapters, be overwhelmed with what the science said, say, well, a smart person agrees with me, I can put this on my shelf now, and just be happy in my heart that a smart person who knows more words than me agrees with me. Would that be a fair assessment of this book?
That would seem like everybody in my trailer park happy.
But also, if you did have a smart person, somebody who has a PhD in a different, completely tangential field or relevant field compared to what this book is about. I mean, if somebody like Humphreys or an astrophysicist has read this book, they would probably take it as gospel because they're not expert enough, somebody like Dr. Mays, to go through and go, okay, here's all the problems. They're also going to have confirmation bias for it because they're not going to understand, even though, there's a lot of legit science in here, but they're not the expertise to differentiate between what is what is correct in here and what is not, right? So it's not just to the layperson or the person already believes. He wrote it technically as well for people that are technically minded that are just not experts in this particular field, I think.
I also think...
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, go ahead, John.
Go ahead, Herman.
Yeah, let me just give an example for me where I did this confirmation bias thing. There was a study that was published a while ago that said flossing doesn't actually matter. And I hate flossing my teeth, so I'm like, screw flossing, I'm going to stop flossing. And I talked to my dentist about it later, and he's like, yeah, that paper is crap. But all I needed was for a smart person with credentials to tell me what I wanted to hear, and bam, I ignored all the warnings from my childhood. So that is, it's signaling. It's the peacock feathers. He's the peacock feathers of Answers in Genesis in a way. So they can signal that they're doing things appropriately.
He said a very revealing thing to me in this debate. He said something about the book. He goes, go buy the book. I'm not making any money off of it.
Yeah.
And I thought, why are you not making any money off of it? Nobody in academia who writes a book like that would be given all the money from their book to the university. In fact, none of it would go to the university. Mm-hmm. If I wrote a book like that, I would have a deal with the publisher where the money would be going to me and the publisher.
Well, the Lord needs
so Ken Ham is taking advantage of him, I think, because that's not a deal that any academic would accept. Yeah.
Ken wouldn't take advantage of anybody. Come on.
I think,
by the way, guys,
never.
With what I just want to tag on real quick what John said. You also can drink 2 glasses of red wine each night and get the same amount of benefits as you would an hour at the gym. That's a true, study. So my wine intake has dramatically increased, and my gym membership is just non-existent now.
Yeah,
did you guys notice there was literally no promotion of this debate from the Answers in Genesis side as well? Like there was
really
no one
they're going to wait till
AIG
after if they do.
Said,
yeah, I don't blame them for that though. They would do that after.
Yeah, there's a reason.
But I got to tell you.
Have you seen our show? Have you seen our show?
Yeah. There are reasons why that is like that, but they've supposedly they will be promoting this and using this. But here's an interesting thing. How many of you have ever seen somebody from Astronomy Genesis come in a hangout like this?
They're changing their tactics.
I was shocked you had Nathaniel on.
I mean,
I'm
not
looking
just
at
to have a debate, but in an after-show hangout like this, I have never seen it happen.
So I actually have an idea on that, and it has to do with the book itself. Yes, this is one of those. Oh, the layperson's not really going to get it. You know, it's going to be along the lines of Darwin's Black Box, etc. It's one of those books to have to pull quotes from to sound smart on a debate, but it's also a vehicle for Ken to have, just like the Nye debate was, to have a book out there in the wild where then science then goes, okay, well, you want it tested here. Haha, look, you're wrong. And then they can claim that 1, they didn't test it right, or 2, they didn't read the book, or more importantly, 3, look, our idea is legitimate enough that they had to test it. So it's the new, seed assigned propitionists wedge idea of, yeah, let's get them out there. Let's get garbage out there in order to test. Because then if they're testing it, there's a sense of legitimacy, at least in their mind.
Well,
they still don't get the idea that when
one of the...
But as Herman pointed out, the testing's been done.
Yeah, I know that's the stupid part about it.
But they don't care about that part. They don't care about it. As long as the book is, as long as the book is mentioned. If the book is mentioned,
that's the danger in me doing this kind of stuff, is because, and this is what makes me a little reluctant to do it. I usually err on the side of doing it, but doing it legitimizes them in a certain way, and that you have to be very careful of, and I'm very aware of that. And that's why he sends it to people to review or to comment on. They say this is bullshit. I'm not going to, they're not going to do that. And that's a smart move in a lot of ways. So you have to be careful that engaging in them doesn't legitimize what they're doing. That's what they're after.
Exactly.
Let me introduce our new guest before you ask a question. Let me introduce this is Christian, I believe.
Yes.
Is that what you want to go on? Okay. Mm-hmm. He is a young Earth creationist, so we'll get his take on how he thinks the debate went from that end here in just a second.
Do you have alcohol with you?
Be nice to him, Aron. Be nice to him.
How much alcohol do you
bring?
No,
I do not. No. Even though I'm in college.
We'll get you some.
Oh, please.
Okay.
I'm getting my flask. I'll be right back.
All right. Grab your drinks now, boys and girls. We'll be gentle. We can't promise anything from Aron, though. Aron's not
there. Unfortunately, I got to duck out now. I got to do some things over here.
John. So
thanks, John.
Hey, John.
This will probably be for Dr.
It was a pleasure.
Mays. Do you know Dr. Stearns, by the way, Frank Stearns? He's a geneticist for Johns Hopkins University. Yeah, okay. He's a friend of ours. So he has this question to ask, and way out of my depths here, so I figured I would just ask it for you. He says, because he wanted to be Dr. Jeanson, but he's not here any longer. But he said, mitochondrial DNA is very good for deep time relationships, but generally too conserved for interspecific studies, like in humans. I want to know what mitochondrial DNA he planned to use for his suggested study, COI control region. So do you know how to answer that as far as what Dr. Jeanson would be using for his studies?
He's not generating his own sequences. He's just getting them off databases. So some of his stuff is taken from whole mitochondrial genomes, so the whole thing. And then
he's not doing unique. He's not doing, but he's not building them himself. He's not doing
No.
a build.
No, there's so many.
Really?
No, he's just getting them off of GenBank, which there's thousands upon thousands of human sequences on GenBank that anybody could
So
get.
are you questioning his data?
wasn't
Are you
himself.
questioning the evidence of where Dr. Jeanson got his evidence from?
No,
Oh, wow.
the
Jumped
data's
right in.
fine.
No, you can
The
get it.
data's
I just
fine.
thought he was doing.
He
I just thought he
didn't
might have been
produce
doing it.
No,
like
there's no way.
What's your criticism then?
What
What is your
I thought he
criticism?
was
So-
like actually doing
That's
it.
what I'm asking.
To answer
Go ahead.
just a second, to answer Frank's question, he's taken either whole mitochondrial genomes, or often he's had papers where he takes the hypervariable region, which is the most highest mutation rate section of the mitochondrial genome. But mitochondrial DNA is not good for doing deep relationships necessarily because it mutates so much. So if it mutates a lot, you could have like an A turn into a G and then back into an A, and you would never see that mutation. So too high a mutation rate is not good, and the longer time you're looking at, the more of that is a problem. So that's why people.
How would you
now
ever
use-
determine something like that? How would you ever know if you had a substitution such you had an A turned to G and then later on it had another mutation that turned it back? How would you even make such a determination?
Well, you wouldn't necessarily, but you can look at the variation that you have, and you can kind of get an idea if it becomes sort of saturated to where there's enough changes to where you start to suspect that some of those changes might be back mutations to other things.
Gotcha.
So you can look at the data and you can measure the data against a model of molecular evolution that tells you certain things, and you can surmise certain things about the data and then say this is not going to be good or whatever. But now people can generate whole genomes, and we do. We even my little lab, we generated a whole genome. So that's an increasingly important thing.
Still like in your minion?
And so
He has minions.
not on
You
the
like
minion.
the minions?
No, not on the minion yet,
okay.
but
Christian,
people do whole,
let me ask you
whole
this.
genomes now. And all mitochondrial DNA studies are kind of antiquated. You can't publish hardly any studies with only mitochondrial DNA anymore. You can't.
And see, that's the one thing I wanted to comment on, because it sounds like anytime when creation scientists do have a piece of evidence that they want to use for their position, like mitochondrial DNA, for example, suddenly the entire scientific community rejects it because it goes against their evolutionary paradigm. And so I think that's a
Could
bit
it
of,
also be that the conclusions that they're using are wrong? Because that's been my experience.
Well, wait, let me clear this up real quick.
Well, Dr. May,
because
yeah,
he's not the first person to use mitochondrial DNA. Creation scientists weren't the first people to use mitochondrial DNA. We've been using mitochondrial DNA before he ever heard of it. So.
But as soon as creationists did use mitochondrial DNA to support their conclusion, then suddenly the scientific community rejected it.
That's not true.
They don't.
Okay, you'll give me the specific
actually not true.
Explain why.
We knew about the problems that are associated with mitochondrial DNA before he ever came in contact, before his claims ever came out. So it has nothing
I
to
had
do
a debate
with
with Pastor. I had a debate with Pastor Bob Enyart of Denver Bible Church.
Go ahead, Aron.
Sorry, I had a debate with Pastor Bob Enyart of Denver Bible Church, and he cited a specific paper. It was a written debate where you can actually do this, and I can never get young Earth creationists to do a written debate with me. So I was ecstatic about this. This guy cited a half a dozen different papers of evidence supporting the creationist position, and it seemed as though he had never even read any of them, because he cited the paper and he said what the paper supported or proved. And me and the other people that are reading this debate read through each of the articles and realized that none of the papers that he cited said any of the things that he said they did. And the arguments that he was using for mitochondrial, it's consistent. There's never going to be, never has been a creationist argument that's actually valid. Every one of them is wrong. All of them.
I am so sorry, Mr. Ra. Mr. Ra, I'm so sorry. That is completely inaccurate.
I've been doing this for 20 years. I have seen no exception. I took the articles.
I want to offer you.
Right?
I want to offer you an exception.
Mr. Ra is wrong. No, he's not wrong.
Listen, Christian. You don't know what you're walking into, man.
Yeah, you're opening
right now. I know. I'm going to do the best that I can do.
Good luck, brother.
Good luck. I wanted to cite I don't know if you know this creationist named Spike Saris. He was an engineer for the United States military space program. And what was it? One of his colleagues came up to him when he was an atheist. One of his colleagues came up to him and he asked him a question. And he said, how can you reconcile the laws of physics with the Big Bang Theory? And he didn't even explain himself. Spike just immediately clicked like, oh, yeah, you're right. This doesn't fit. And so because of the evidence, later on, he saw more evidence in astronomy and cosmology as to how the young Earth paradigm best fits the scientific evidence better than the Big Bang paradigm.
An astronomer
yes.
saw evidence of a
yes.
6,000-year-old universe.
Yeah,
yes,
where's this happening?
I'm going to call bullshit again.
Oh, no. You mentioned this physicist, Dr. Russell Humphreys. He made.
I know Humphreys. I know Humphreys. Wait, hang on. I know Humphreys well, so I've talked to him about this specifically.
He knows everybody.
So
before you both start throwing out names,
this one because I just literally talked. He's just literally corresponded with me just a few days ago. So
right. Yeah. So I think you know where I'm going.
What does Dr. Humphreys say? Go ahead.
Well, he made a very specific prediction when it came to Uranus and Neptune.
Sure.
He said
the magnetism. Sure.
Yeah, magnetism. If they were 6,000 years old, 6,000 years ago, magnetic field should be at this level. It should be at this level.
Let him get his thought out.
When the Voyager 2 spacecraft went and measured it, his young Earth creationist prediction was proven right. And you can find that anywhere on the internet.
How,
okay, now you can shut him up.
Does this prediction relate to a universe that's 6,000 years old?
Yeah,
how does this change so that the ancient Sumerians were already inventing agriculture 1,000 years before the sun existed? How?
What does that got to do with anything that I just said?
Well, the big thing is that he didn't use a young Earth.
If you're talking about a universe that's 6,000 years old, and Sumerian agriculture is 7,000 years old, and the temple of Göbekli Tepe is 11,000 years old, I think you see there should be a problem, right?
And the Sphinx is 25,000 years old.
I'm going to call into question. Then I'm going to call into question the dating methods that you used for.
No, Christian.
For the example.
Christian, two things.
Every different type of dating method, from photoluminescence and all types of radioisotopes, every last one of the radioisotopes, to VARVs, to dendrochronology rings, everything, right? So mitochondrial DNA on top of everything is wrong, and only the magic book of fables with the talking fucking snake is right.
Well, we're talking about the Uranus thing. We're talking about
the paper. That paper you're talking about.
Stop talking about mine.
Let Paul explain this one because
I think Paulogia wants to say something.
Yeah, Paul.
So that paper you're talking about, Humphreys basically threw a lot of math out there that when you work out the math, basically comes out to nothing. What it relied on was the mass of the planet. So what was well known at the time was the mass of Saturn, the magnetic field of Saturn, the magnetic field of Jupiter, the magnetic field of Venus, and the magnetic field of Earth were all well known. So Humphreys just randomly, he picked a number that he knew roughly how big Uranus was. He picked a number that was that size, and it turned out to be very vaguely correct. Not even within an order of magnitude correct. It was just vaguely correct. And it turns out all that mattered, the only thing in Humphreys' equations that made any difference was the size of the planets. So he predicted nothing at all.
Yeah.
And his 6,000-year-old, which is I know where Steve's going with this.
Christian,
Humphreys specifically says that the reason he believes all these numbers, he plugs in 6,000 as his assumption. He did not, as you implied, that he discovered things and came to number 6,000. No, he started with 6,000 and then manufactured everything else afterwards. Humphreys was not an old Earth creationist of some kind who came to the light. He assumes 6,000 with everything he does.
Yes.
So don't tell us that he came to that by evidence.
So Christian, he didn't have a model.
I expected this.
Well, hang on. Let me explain this real quick. He didn't have a model that he used to arrive at the conclusion of a young Earth. He started with his presupposition that it's young. He's done the same exact thing with me when it came to the helium diffusion rates and it come to accelerated decay. He starts with a presupposition and he tries to find evidence to support that, contrary to what actually you do in science. And then when you ask him for the actual evidence that leads him to an actual conclusion, it does not exist. Simple as that. Humphreys, I've been trying for ages to get him to tell me where he got his information for the rate program for the accelerated decay. He just said a publication to Journal of Creation. That's going to be, I think, next edition, and Dr. Lachelle actually promoted one too. Everything in that doesn't even address the questions that me, Dr. Lachelle, and Dr. Henke asked him about. It was just nothing in there. And plus, and Paul knows this, he deliberately changed one of the mathematical formulas to suit his presupposition. He actually changed the math. He changed natural logarithm from base 10 just because it better suited his graph.
Way.
On the
no
okay,
way.
So first up, I want to address.
And that's a fact.
I want to address what Paul said. Okay, I don't deny that. Yes. I'm going to assume. I'm just going to go, for the sake of argument, assume that you are right. He started with a presupposition that the Bible is inerrant and that the universe is 6,000 years old. So based off of that presupposition,
reversal.
Sorry,
Ken. I can see where you're going. Go.
Okay, so he just started with the presupposition. I'm going to assume that the universe is 6,000 years old. So based off of that assumption, I'm going to make a prediction. If I'm going to be correct, or let's say, using Paul's words, vaguely correct, then that's going to give credibility to the Bible. If my supposition is wrong, and my prediction is wrong based off of that presupposition that I made, then okay, fine, you can lambast my creationist prediction.
No, that magnetic field paper you're talking about.
No, hold on.
There's no way.
When the Voyager 2 measured that, he was right based off.
So
there's never been a time.
Let me say something. Science works exactly opposite of the way that faith does. Faith does everything it can to reinforce itself, even lying and perpetuating many different frauds and hoaxes to try to perpetuate their belief system. Science works to try to find what's wrong with our own theory and disprove it however we can. And then the failure to disprove our own theory is what takes a hypothesis to the level of theory. Do you understand that? By trying to disprove it?
I do.
Okay, so there's never been a time, ever, when a creationist ever proposed anything that would, if my prediction is wrong, this disproves creation. That never happens, will never happen, because they can't ever admit that they're wrong. The statement of faith by all the creationist organizations says they must not ever admit when they're wrong.
Okay, now I can easily throw that exact same logic back on. No offense to Dr. Mace.
Please don't do it.
I can easily. What?
You know where he's going. You know what he's about to do.
It's like Jimmy had done that, man.
The fallacy of false equivalence on top of it.
Well, hold on, no. You don't even know what I'm going to say yet, okay? You know
I've only done this for 20 years, so I have a pretty good idea. You're going to say that science is based on faith too, and that you're going to project your own faults onto those who will not share them. That's what you're about to do, because that's what everybody always does.
Close.
It's an equivalent.
Go ahead, Christian.
Hold on, calm down.
Go ahead.
Close. What I was trying to say was a documentary by Ben.
Go back to cleaning my
called Expel.
Ben Stein.
Anytime.
Ben Stein.
Yes.
Ben Stein.
Yeah.
Let him get his
I'm trying
argument
to say
out. Let him
something.
get his argument.
Sorry, you're right. Go ahead.
Anytime.
Can
somebody?
Aaron, just hold on 1 second. Let him. I don't want to make it seem like there's 9 people ganging up on one guy. Let him at least get his argument out. As wrong as he is, just let him get it out, and then then the hyenas can jump in. Okay, Christian, the floor is yours. Please get your argument out.
Yeah, okay. So what I was going to say was, I'm going to slightly disagree with what Dr. May said. Like, if I offer up a theory that puts the general theory of evolution into question or somehow disproves it, as
you mean a hypothesis?
Yes. Sorry, a hypothesis.
That it has to be proven to become a theory.
Let it finish.
Right. No, you're right.
It has to be demonstrated.
If you were to demonstrate a hypothesis that would put the general theory of evolution into question, he would be famous. I'm sorry. Anytime a professor, you can look at the documentary Expelled, for example. Anytime a professor...
That's not a documentary. That's propaganda.
Please let the kids speak, man.
When Ben Stein...
The reason being is because we all have seen the movie many times. It's a mockumentary.
He asked
Dawkins to come up with a naturalistic explanation for intelligence. How could intelligent design be natural was the question that he asked Dawkins. So Dawkins is now in a position to say, well, what kind of natural agent could be an intelligent agent? Well, the only option Dawkins could come up with was that, you know, well, I guess an alien could be an alien intelligence that might have technology, I guess. Yeah, so the question was worded to pigeonhole Dawkins, who then Stein can then say that Dawkins believes aliens created. No, Dawkins obviously doesn't believe any of that. Stein is a liar.
And they also did Frankenstein cuts.
They did some creative editing in that as well.
Yeah, do you know what a Frankenstein cut is?
But the main point I wanted to go
everybody in the live chat is wanting to let the kid. They're saying let the guy speak. So I do think it's fair that we give him the opportunity to get out his argument, and then you can crush him. Like I said, the hyenas can jump in as soon as he gets done.
I'll mute my microphone until you tell me to unmute it.
Let him finish.
We all agree that he's wrong, but let him get his argument out.
Go ahead.
What I wanted to say was, any professor that would ever question Darwin and his theory, the scientific community would lambast him for it. Like Michael Behe, for example, he accepts common ancestry. He's considered a theistic evolutionist. But when he offered a biochemical challenge to evolution, the scientific community raked him over the coals and they hated him. So I'm sorry. I'm
going to take turns here. Aron's first. I'm second.
Okay. Mr. Aron.
Dr. Behe was not lambasted. He was wrong. Kenneth Miller, who is literally a textbook evolutionist, but he's also a traditional Catholic, had already refuted Behe in the scientific curricula. He had already shown that the arguments Behe was making were false, but Behe can't admit that. So on trial, for in Kitzmiller versus Dover, Behe famously said that they were never, ever going to find a scientific explanation for the blood clotting or the I don't remember which one. There was like a half a dozen different things that he said. Yeah, and so it wasn't that one. It was a different one. But anyway, the attorney then hands 54 publications on top of the desk, all of them presenting a scientific explanation for the very thing that he said so no scientist would ever do. And so he said, well, that's not good enough, or words to that effect. So. And the judge noted this. The judge is a Christian, by the way, a Bush-appointed Republican conservative Christian judge. He noted that all of the creationists on that case.
Give Aron the same respect that I just asked. Let Aron finish his thought, and then you can jump in.
I'm almost done. Okay. The judge noted how disappointing it was that all of the Christians promoting intelligent design creationism, and yes, it is creationism, would lie again and again to try to conceal their true agenda. That was in the judge's ruling.
So what is the true agenda?
Dr. Mays? I'm going to do next, and then Dr. Mays.
Mine is super quick.
Real quick. Okay, go ahead. I'll go after yours, please.
Did Behe lose his job?
No, but his biochemistry department wrote an entire paper on him saying we disagree with everything he says. So he lost
respect. Did he lose his job?
Well, okay.
I'm not taking off my shirt, by the way, live chat, so don't even start with that shit.
If you come up with an idea that makes no sense, and all of the scientists disagree with you because you're, and they can show you that you're wrong, and you refuse to admit that you're wrong, isn't it appropriate that the people associated with you, is it appropriate that people that associated with you, what? Oh, there's a delay. Did somebody say what's the problem?
Let people finish.
I think it was Dr. Mays.
We're walking all over.
Go ahead.
I'm done.
So real quick, first of all, Aron, I think you're talking about blood clotting cascades, right? For coagulation, that was what they were talking about in the Dover trial. Okay, so that's what you were talking about. But correct me if I'm wrong, Dr. Mays. Because he's talking about Darwinism, right? If I said, hey, you know what? Darwin was freaking wrong. Darwin believed in Mendelian inheritance for blending. He didn't know anything about particulate. So basically, you know what? Darwin was screw the pooch. He was completely wrong. Would I be basically cast out of the academic community for saying that, even though that is true? Darwin got shit wrong.
Yes.
No. In my opinion, yes. You would get lambasted over the coals for.
No, I wouldn't. Why would I get lambasted for that? Darwin was wrong about that. Darwin did not understand genetics. He didn't know anything about DNA. He thought it was blending, not
I teach every day that Darwin was wrong about genetics. Every day I teach about genetics.
Darwin believed in gemules.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. He didn't understand how vertical gene transmission worked. He didn't know what genes were. He thought they were like magic little packets.
We didn't even
of
have
shit.
decent fossils during Darwin.
I want to know how
Christian
Jesus get land-based. What's the problem?
What is your single evidence for
Christian?
Like, what would you put forth
Okay,
as your,
I'm getting
your
multiple
best
questions at
evidence
once.
for it? What's your best
My-
evidence? I think we can just start there. What's your best evidence?
My best evidence for creation. Okay, well, as of now, I'm sure you're all aware of Dr. Jason Lisle, the astrophysicist.
Yes.
Oh yeah.
So,
Yes.
And if that's your best evidence, you may as well just stop.
no. Hey.
You also use the word evidences,
Hear me out.
don't you, Christian?
Yeah,
You use the word
evidence, by the
evidences.
way,
I am not even done.
It's
Okay.
Okay, go ahead.
Scientifically, philosophically, one is I don't know if you read the book, Dr. Jason Lisle's The Ultimate Proof of Creation, how naturalism basically makes no sense, but however, atheistic presuppositions rely on a Christian worldview. Have you heard of this before?
No, they don't.
We've heard of that before.
Yes,
That's not
we've
how
all
it
heard
works,
of
but
it.
we heard of it.
Yeah,
Are you sure
and
you
again,
want
We've all heard it.
like
Are you sure
every
you want
other
this, Christian?
creationist argument, that too is false.
How so?
My perspective doesn't rely on any Christian worldview to begin with. And it's not a presupposition either.
Well, actually it does. You're using it right now. It's the laws of logic. The laws of logic are a Christian doctrine.
And according to Hume, every animal and infant,
No.
every animal and infant has to assume that reality exists and that we are a part of it. This is not something we have a choice in. Literally, we cannot function at all if we assume anything else. So we have no choice of that.
Yes,
So this
I
is not going to be going into the presuppositions. The presuppositions is like a little bit beyond that, where you start presupposing that it's 6,000 years old, so you're going to plug that into all your math, and you're going to presuppose that there's God, regardless of whether there's any evidence of that.
No,
or
no,
not.
I'm just cleaning
all over
while
the
it's
place
going
here.
on.
I'm trying to stay on one topic, which is the laws of logic. All of you right now, rightfully so, have been using the laws of logic in your debates and in your arguments. However, in an atheistic, naturalistic universe, you cannot, for the existence of the laws of logic, a Christian can.
Okay, let me hand
Hey, by the way,
Christian, no.
Here's the big thing. Guess what? Some of us in here are atheists.
Yeah, I'm not an atheist, first of all.
Yeah, there's
Second of all,
Okay.
do you realize,
I do apologize. Okay.
Do you realize that the laws of logic only hold true in classical logic? There are paraconsistent and doubt-theistic logic where you can actually have violations, because it doesn't even have things like law of excluded middle. Matter of fact, Aristotle himself argued against the law of excluded middle. So these things are not something that are woven into the fabric of the universe that people try to make it out to believe. They are things that we observed, and they're descriptively given to people because we observed them. However, they are not ontological necessities. We know for a fact that things like law of excluded middle would not hold in certain conditions. So these things are not things that have to be. They're not any Christian worldview. They're not any atheist position. They're just something that holds true in a specific type of logic known as classical logic, which we generally use, but there's a hell of a lot of logic in
that does make sense.
The path you're going down, Christian, let me just say, the path you're going down could be misconstrued as cruel and unusual punishment. I just want to throw that out there before you continue to go.
I tell you what, though, if I would be the happiest person in the world, I'm sure everybody else in here, if you give us anything as far as we have just have an argument that we've never heard before. There's never a younger creationist. There's the evidence that none of us have heard before. I would be thrilled.
Christian also, keep in mind there are Christians there are Christians in the room, so don't argue for Christianity. You also have to convince Christians that young Earth is right as opposed to the other. So just prefacing that.
Okay, first off,
there are Christians in the room.
You're right.
Wait a minute.
I thought we already agreed for those.
So, okay, how about, you are aware of the scientist, PhD from Cambridge, Stephen Meyer.
Oh,
Dr.
yes.
Mace's,
I was supposed to debate him a couple of years ago.
really? Oh, wow.
Go ahead.
I would have seen it, actually.
We're going to be working on it.
In the fossil record, I do not see, unless you can show me differently, I do not see the tree of life, the tree of common ancestry in the fossil record. I don't.
I can show it to you.
I do.
I can
Yeah,
show
but-
it.
I'm
to you.
sorry.
Aaron.
Are you trying to bring up the fossil record with a
We're
paleontologist?
going to hear Aron, and then we're going to go to Trevor.
Are you trying to bring up the tree of life with a taxonomist?
Listen,
Let's do
Aron
this.
and then Trevor. Aron and then Trevor. Yeah, right, go ahead, Aron.
Oh lordy.
Okay, I've got a video series that you should see. It's called The Systematic Classification of Life. Just Google the Systematic Classification of Life playlist. It's up to episode 34. It will be roughly 46 videos by the time it's done. You will see the taxonomic tree of life. If you want a shorter summary, that's the 10th foundational falsehood of creationism.
I'll link it to
I
you,
will watch-
Christian. All right, Trevor. Now,
One of
listen,
the- one of the main arguments-
Christian, hold on, Christian. Before you make another, Trevor is an expert in this. This is what he does. Okay, so Trevor will
Which one's
now
Trevor?
explain right above you. The beard.
Got it.
Greg Brady
Okay, got
up here. Yeah.
Go ahead, Greg.
Okay,
Go ahead,
so you say there's no evidence of transitional forms in the fossil record. Is that correct?
No. That's not what I said. What I said was
Okay.
the idea of common ancestry, the tree of life.
He doesn't
What
see
I
the
see-
tree of life.
Okay.
Yeah, and
what
that's
I-
what
so
what
basically,
I see is an orchard. I see an orchard of life. Though to use Jonathan Wells' PhD terminology.
Jonathan Wells, PhD, was given his entire higher education by Reverend Sung Myung Moon for the specific purpose that he could then undermine Darwinism from within. And then Jonathan Wells said that there was no such thing as a tree of life, and that's why I featured him prominently in the 10th foundational falsehood of creationism, the 14th foundational falsehood of creationism, and the 11th foundational falsehood of creationism. You should see all three.
All right, Trevor.
Which you should watch, by the way, Christian.
Okay.
Hold on, guys. Hold on.
Or read
Trevor,
the book.
please.
Yeah. Okay. So there's no tree of life in the fossil record. Well,
I see an orchard, not a tree.
Christian.
Well, that's
finish.
perfectly fine. Because we have 100% factual evidence of common ancestry going throughout multiple different species, going back through the reptile-mammal transition, going back through the lobe-fin fishes, going back through, early arthropods, early tetrapods, all of that. Is there any one specific of all of those fossils from the entirety of the horse series to Tiktaalik that you would like to say does not show common ancestry of anything? Well, I mean, we could start with the peclosaurs, synapsids and diapsids and anapsids, since they all came from a singular skull morphology and then later evolved. Here's that scary word for you. I mean, where would you like to go with this? I mean, would you like to also argue that there's no geologic record either? Because I can show you where you can go see it in its entirety in 32 separate places on the planet. I mean, let's go, man.
It's also
indicated. I'm going to be.
It's also indicated.
I'm going to be completely honest.
Not just morphologically, but also through embryology and now through genetics as well.
Oh yeah, but we're specifically talking the fossil record.
Little things like the speed of light.
Right. The fossil record. So
yeah, I mean, there's a lot of other ones, but he specifically brought up fossils, so I stopped cleaning my guns for this one.
Go ahead, Christian.
Yeah,
That's not a threat. I was
I
literally,
see what you're saying.
so many people were talking, and this is on my table. I was just like, oh, I'm going to the range tomorrow. I should probably clean that.
Just roll, Christian. You got to roll with it now.
Yeah.
Right. No, you're
committed.
Good. Okay. So when it comes to common ancestry, or like what Answers in Genesis calls molecules to man or particles to people evolution, what I see
Yeah, they're
in the
garbage.
fossil record, ad hominem.
Guys.
No.
Guys, please.
No, it is garbage. Sorry.
It's 8-on-1 right now. Let the kid at least get his argument out. Okay, we can at
I
least
will
get
mute
him.
my mic.
We got Aron. It's
with,
9
with molecules
people.
with molecules to man evolution, I'm going to steal Stephen Meyer's little arguments here from Signature, or no, Darwin's Doubt. I'll steal his argument a little bit. What we see in the fossil record is in the Precambrian, we see, jellyfish sort of fossils, or, very, very primordial, not primordial, very basic life of fossils. And then suddenly in the Cambrian, boom, you have vertebrates. You have this huge.
Well, no, you don't actually. You
have this
don't.
unleashment
1 second, Aron.
of
Just let him
information.
get out, then I'll let you crush it. Go ahead.
All right, sorry.
Because what I see is from the Precambrian to the Precambrian to the Cambrian, we see this massive diversification, this explosion of life. And what had to happen from the tiny from the cellular fossils of Precambrian to the vertebrates in the Cambrian, you had to have this massive addition of information, put it inside the genome. Where did that information come from? That is something evolutionists have a very hard time answering without the concept of an intelligent designer.
Want to bet?
Very easy time. Very easy time. And we don't need to evoke any magic imaginary friend. So what we have in the Precambrian is already we have orders of animals that have already gone extinct before the Cambrian explosion. We have precursors for the animals that we later see in the Cambrian. We have a number of them. We're finding more all the time. And then we have other species that are going extinct during the Cambrian before we even get to the ends. Many of the species that began in the Cambrian are already done. And you know what we don't have at the beginning of the Cambrian? Vertebrates. None. We start getting vertebrates at the very end of the Cambrian. Not the Cambrian explosion, the Cambrian period, a period of 50 million years. So what we see is a progression of basically worm-like invertebrate beings until we start having things that start acquiring shells and start acquiring bones, and they start branching out in the Cambrian, and they continue branching out as some of them go extinct and so on. So we see exactly what evolution predicts that we would see. And we don't see anything remotely similar to what creationism sees. And we don't see a problem explaining this with evolution the way creationists have nothing but a problem trying to explain it, even though they get to evoke magic.
Christian, don't you think it's kind of odd that you're invoking an argument? Wait, Christian, don't you think it's kind of odd you're invoking an argument that the Cambrian explosion happened like 540 million some odd years ago? I mean, doesn't that whole just shit all over the young earth creationism thing to begin with when you're invoking an argument that goes back 540 million years?
Millions of years. Yeah, I know. I saw this one coming. What I tried to do was I should have voiced this better, but I tried to assume the deep time concept just for the sake of argument.
Why?
Just to explain.
Why would you?
Why assume that
if you don't believe it?
Oh no, because I assume that just because even with the concept of deep time, an intelligent designer is still needed. And so my next question was actually meant.
An intelligent designer is not only not needed, but it's not possible.
Well, it's not parsimonious more than anything
The problem the problem is, Christian, that you get young earth creationists that try to attack science or arguments in specific areas within a bubble. And they do so usually pretty unsuccessfully. But when you look outside of that bubble at the different evidences, whether it's different dating methods instead of like trying to pick one apart, when you look at physics, when you look at psychology, when you look at anthropology, when you look at the pressures of just social evolution, everything points to the fact that at the very least, it is not necessary for there to be a God. Not necessarily there is no God. That's a harder argument to make. But it's certainly not necessary. So when you kind of cherry pick out things and just point at the same arguments people make over and over and just ignore all of that mountain of evidence, it doesn't really hold up. Like, people don't want to take that seriously.
Yeah, right. David, do you remember the other day when I had asked Site 10 that very same question? I said, you're positing a presupposition that God exists. You need to say that's a metaphysical necessity. But did you notice though? Sai did not want to answer that question. He said, that's a good question, Steve, but he changed it to something else because there was no way he can demonstrate that God is a metaphysical necessity for that to make the argument that you have to have a God for any of this.
The real problem with Sai 10's argument, I find, is, and it's the problem with any argument that functions this way, you can use his identical argument with him and just swap out God for anything. And it's equally as annoying.
We should have invited Sai. Right? That would have been lovely.
That's
not no, not happening.
Aron,
why didn't we think
not
of
make
that?
a link?
Look at Aron's face. Okay, so here's what I want. I want to hear what Christian, without anybody interrupting, I want to hear his answer for in the light of this overwhelming evidence, how you still can hold fast to those beliefs when. In the three examples that you've given tonight, they've been refuted. I know that you don't want to think they have been, but they have been. So how do you say that they're not?
I'm going to be completely honest. Right. Well, I'm going to be completely honest. I am a freshman in college at the university. Hey, I'm a freshman in college. a lot of these scientific arguments I cannot hold. I try to hold with the best of my ability. So the best thing I can do right now is, one, try to give you some more arguments with the best of my ability, or two, I can tell you, like to Dr. Mays, for example, I said, Dr. Mays, go talk to Stephen Meyer. He knows this better than I do. Or to Mr. Raw, where you had a degree in geosciences, I think. I said, Mr. Raw, go talk to Dr. Snelling or Dr. Austin.
Let me stop you right here, and I don't mean to be rude, but let me stop you right here, Christian. Let me just stop you right here. I don't mean to be rude, but how can you come down so definitively on your position as a Christian and that evolution is false when you just admitted that you don't know these topics so well? Like, shouldn't the jury still be out?
And
you should still be like trying to find the answers to that. You should still be looking for the answers and not be so committed to the stance that nope, the science is wrong and the God belief is the right one to go. If you just admitted that you yourself aren't really that familiar with these, you're telling people to go see these people because it feels.
I mean,
right,
the honest confirmation bias. I don't understand the evidence.
Well, Christian, you should realize that we have talked to Snellings, we've talked to Austin, we've talked to all of them. They don't want to give their data. They don't want to answer these questions. So when you say go talk to them, everybody in here has probably tried to talk to them. I have emails from all of them, and I've corresponded with most of them. They refuse to go on a program that they don't have full control of to be asked the hard questions. This is the first time ever we've ever seen it done by AIG. Go ahead, Aron.
Aron?
You're muted, Aron.
You're muted, Aron.
Non sequitur, by the way. What are you drinking?
Did I do that?
You're gonna have to repeat that.
You did do that.
I was impressed that you had someone from Answers in Genesis be on this show, because they're usually not that forthcoming. Yep. They have strict control over their information and how they're viewed by the public, because they're all about maintaining a belief. Everything you just said earlier about how scientists would be lambasted if they didn't support the status quo. No, that's what Answers in Genesis does. That's what all the creationist organizations do. But if you do that in science, that's the way to become rich and famous. Challenge the status quo and come up with something nobody else can prove wrong. You will be famous that way. That's the way to be a success in science, not be lambasted.
Unless you posit God into it. Unless you posit God into it, you're ignored.
No. If you posit God into it, and if you had evidence that actually showed, that there was a God, Nobel Prize, rich and famous. You're the one. Everybody would celebrate you. But the fact that there is no evidence of God at all, and everything that promotes that idea is lying and obviously false, demonstrably wrong, that's the problem. And that's what you need to see. Now, see, I can talk to any creation scientist. None of them will ever say that they can prove to me that God exists. None of them will ever say that they can prove that creationism is true to my satisfaction. They can prove it to their own satisfaction because they have lower criteria. I can prove evolution to your satisfaction. So where I would fail my own challenge unless you admit that I made my point. I can do that with him exchanges.
Just out of curiosity, what would you win the Nobel? Just out of curiosity, I'm curious. What would you win the Nobel if you prove God? If you actually demonstrate God? Is physics, chemistry, medicine, literature, peace, economic studies? What would that fall under? I wonder.
It'd make a new category.
All of them.
You know what?
No. Let's think about this, Christian. Let's think about this. Let's think about this, because we often hear that that atheists like myself just deny that there's a God so that we can go do what we want. Does pretending that there's no God, if we actually thought there was a God, would pretending he's not there make him go away? Would that isn't the only thing that really pisses God off when you don't acknowledge him? Isn't that the only way to guarantee that you're going to go to hell? So obviously that story's wrong. Like every other creationist argument, that too is wrong. So you're not okay. What have you got?
Okay, you're jumping all over the place. You're attacking God. Now you're attacking creationism. Now
I'm not attacking God. I said I can prove to your satisfaction that evolution is legitimately true, that it's demonstrable reality. I can prove that to your satisfaction so that you will admit it and you will be an evolutionist for the rest of your life. I've been offering this challenge for 20 some odd years. only once has anybody ever taken me up on that and gone actually through the whole thing, because usually they freak. Right at hearing that I could prove it, that's enough for them to freak, because they maintain that they want to believe what they want to believe regardless what it's true. And I've had that admitted to me numerous different ways. They phrase it all kinds of different ways, but the belief matters more than whatever the truth is. That's the problem. But I've got the truth.
Okay, Mr. Raw.
The actual truth, and I can show it to you. And that's what scares creationists.
Okay, fine. Because how many times? I will take that challenge. I am confident enough in my faith and in the Bible that I will take your challenge, Mr. Raw.
All right, we're arranging, but I got to tell you, he isn't lying, because this is the God honest truth. Am I making this up? How many times have we gotten messages from people saying how we've influenced them, and we've actually shown people that things, and they said, you know what, we've changed our position. We're no longer you're creationists. We no longer believe these things. We've learned something from everyone.
Yeah,
look at Paulogia.
I'm saying
so when he says he can do it, we've done it.
Yeah. And I can't raise my hand, so please let me talk.
Okay, sorry.
I have a question.
He's all looking around. He's like, "Fuck off."
I can't get a word in. So I have a question. You're a freshman in college. First of all, which college are you going to? And then the second part would be like, why don't you wait?
College.
Why don't you
wait
Rambo
College
till you're done with college before you make a judgment on things like this? Because you're calling on all kinds of authority, but you haven't looked at the rest of the other people who've done that. You're discounting things that disagree with you. To me, that's dishonest. I would think you would rather take the time and look at all the evidence and all the positions that are available to you, and then come to a conclusion. Not put the cart before the horse, like it seems like you're doing.
I do hear you. Yeah, yes, absolutely. I do hear you. And for example, when I compared William Lane Craig's Reasonable Faith to Richard Dawkins' The God Delusion, I'm sorry, but when it comes to evolutionary biology, Richard Dawkins, he's great. He knows his field. But when it comes to philosophy, Dawkins is a mere layman.
He's horrible.
I'm sorry.
He's horrible at philosophy.
Yeah.
No, I'm on board with you on that. I think Dawkins is just, he needs to stick with biology. I'm the first to agree, and everybody I've talked to thinks he's really bad.
But then again, talking about I'm horrible at philosophy too. I'm horrible at philosophy too. But when I hear William Lane Craig in that book say that, you know, when people deny. What's that?
William Craig is dishonest as fuck.
Yeah, when he says that atheists do not deny Christianity for any reason of science, but we do it because we want to sin or whatever his bullshit excuse was. You know, if this is the way we all do it. No, there's not the way any of us do it. This is not the reason any of us choose the position that we have. So, I mean, yet again, just like all other creationist arguments, this too is wrong.
Yeah, William Lane Craig has one goal. That is to get the audience on his side by any means necessary, and he does use some dishonest tactics to do it.
Let me address
dishonest, really.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, there's not an honest creationist, not a professional creationist. Well, I'll make another challenge to you, just for grins, because this one is a faster one, and this is one I put out in my book. I said, name for me one professional. Wait, no, let me start with the correct way. Name for me one evolutionary scientist in any field specific to evolution that has ever lied in the act of promoting evolution over creationism. No one's ever answered that challenge. They think they've got answers, and I know what the top 5 are. I put them in my book. The second part of that challenge is to name a professional creationist who did not lie when promoting creationism over evolution. No one's ever been able to answer that either.
All of the PhD scientists.
Let me address Christopher for a second.
And ICR.
Yeah, well, Dave, let him respond, and then we'll get your thoughts, and then he can respond to you. I don't want to back it up too much, but let him respond to this, and then we'll get to you. Go ahead.
This is something I'm trying to understand.
Did you just say all of the scientists at AIG, of which I've already shown several are liars, and all of the scientists at ICR, of which I already have documentation that several of them are liars?
Aron, you're already going to kill him.
What do you mean by lying?
Let him at least get it
out. I mean, deliberately misrepresenting information with the deliberate intent to deceive. That's what I mean.
Let him
information misrepresented or misinformation.
Let him get out his answer.
The Bible says.
But they do it anyways.
Of course.
Creation
Wait,
scientists.
what do you mean that goes against what the Bible
Hold
says?
on. Look, I don't want. Look, let's not have to go to the
dishonesty
the thing. I do want to hear what he has to say, and then I promise you that everybody will get their chance to skewer him. Like, you know, he's getting it. He's getting his.
That's
just
not
let
what
him
I'm
get
trying
it
to do.
I know that.
I
know that. But that's what
I apologize
if
I'm dominating it. I'll be happy to back up, but I'm not trying to skewer him. The boy is infected by something that I want to cure him of. That's the thing I'm trying to do. Sure. I'm not trying to skewer him.
Okay. Yes, that was.
This is
although that is what's
here, by the way, people. I don't know why.
That is what's happening. But let's everybody just let him finish out. They can at least say that we listen to what his side of the argument was. Okay, yes. Christian.
Thank you.
Floor is yours, and then as soon as you're done, people can jump in. All right.
Okay, of course. Thank you. When it comes to answers in Genesis and ICR, these scientists have gone through the dissertation program. They have earned their PhD. They have gone through college. They have gone through all the scientific obstacles that they have had to crawl through. And so when I hear that creation scientists are dishonest, the way I hear it is they're presenting evidence, that they're presenting a case for creationism that I don't like, that's too convincing for me, so I'm going to close my ears shut and call them liars. That's what I hear.
Okay, Christian, you can call on whoever you want to answer your question. I'm going to let him pick who he wants to hear from.
Okay. I'll call on the professor.
Dr.
Which
Mays.
one?
Who's the professor?
Yeah, which one?
Sorry.
Mays.
Sorry, Dr. Mays.
This isn't Gilligan's Island. This is a Brady Bunch. I don't know which one the professor is.
So you're saying that Christian scientists at AIG and places like this, creation organizations, we are ignoring them because we know they're right. Is that correct?
Well, I'm very careful as to not go into conspiracy here. I don't want to say that. What I want to say
Isn't that what you're talking about?
Okay.
What's so let me first of all, you say they have gone through and gotten their PhDs and done everything that we've done. No, they haven't. They haven't done everything that I've done. Do you know how hard it is to get a tenure track position at even a small university? Do you understand how competitive
Dr. Danny Faulkner.
And then wait, let me finish. And do you know how hard it is to then get tenure? It's darn near. Most people in academia drop out before they get that far. Most of the people who are at places like AIG and other places have not made it in academia, and they wouldn't be competitive. Nathaniel Jenson wouldn't be competitive, and he knows this. He wouldn't be competitive for a job anywhere else. He has 3 publications. So they haven't done everything that I've done. They haven't done everything that a scientist has done. They don't have nearly the record. They don't have the publications. They don't have the postdocs. They haven't gotten grants. They haven't had the experience. They're not at the same level as someone at even kind of a mediocre middle range institution with a PhD would be. So when you say that they've done everything that I've done, let me finish. When you say they've done everything that I've done or everything that other PhDs have done, that's simply not true. That's untrue.
Okay.
And so that's why they're not credible. They're not credible. That's why we don't believe them. Not because we have some conspiracy against them. They don't have good arguments. They're not convincing, and they're not credible in their field.
Aron?
And so
anything else?
And so what you said is they're not credible. Like one example you said was due to lack of publications. So what I would like to ask everybody is, why don't creation scientists have as many publications as evolutionary scientists?
Because they have terrible, unconvincing ideas.
Aron?
That they can't
So like Andrew Snelling, for example, used to be an actual mainstream geologist. He himself dated the Congora Formation in the billions of years old, and he went through all the specifics of all the different methods by which he did that. But simultaneously, Not later than. Simultaneously, he was also writing for the publication that would then later become Answers in Genesis, wherein he said that everything was 6,000 years old and all geology was caused by the flood. So he is directly contradicting his own work. So he's
And I can tell you what.
he's
I saw one of your
I can tell you
videos on
why
this,
too.
like,
He wants to believe that he's not a part of nature. He wants to believe in his magic imaginary friend. He wants to have the belief that everybody else wants to believe, but he will lie to defend that belief. He can't ever give. He can't give the data. He can't.
We are interpreting this two different ways.
I approach it honestly. And
okay,
so and then we need to jump to Steve.
Okay. Yeah,
and I didn't even say the thing I was originally raising my hand over. It was too long.
Okay, Steve, Paul, and then Trevor, and then David. Steve, Paul, Trevor, David. Steve, Paul, Trevor, David.
Okay. Real quick. One, by the way, he's not the only one that has done that. There's another scientist that actually wrote a paper on rubidium strontium, who's a young Earth creationist, and basically shat all over his PhD thesis by denying everything he wrote in it to get his PhD thesis, because you have to deny things like that, like decay rates. But here's my question to you. You're saying that that we're calling the AIG scientists PhDs, legitimate PhDs, and granted they are legit, dishonest. But aren't you saying that the 99.7% of other scientists out there, they're being dishonest by promoting evolution? I mean, you're looking at a 3 standard deviation away from norm. You're talking about so fringe to be on the outskirts of mainstream science, to the point where they're not even at the table for science. They're not. It's like flat Earth. Right. We don't go around saying, "Hey, let's discuss flat Earth." Young Earth creationism is not up to the standard to even be talking about certain things in the scientific realm. There's a reason for that. But you're saying that the entire rest of the scientific community, people like Dr. Mays, who also has a legitimate PhD, is either deceiving himself or lying. Which more likely, 99.7% out there, or the 0.3% that is literally?
It's actually 99.86. It's actually 99.86% of Earth and life scientists.
That sound Christian?
Yeah, no,
that sound
still
Christian?
manning his argument, best case scenario. So
that's the guillotine coming down on your neck, Christian.
Who's next?
Okay,
Paul's next.
No.
Paul.
Yeah, I was going to bring up the Snelling example. I would also like the video I'm working on right now, which is talking about the Genesis Paradise Lost film, for example. There's a scientist in there, and I wish I was going to try to look up his name. Anyway, this is a scientist in there who I will be showing clips where the scientist goes through in the film about how carbon dating therefore shows that we can't age rocks wrong because there's no carbon and all that kind of stuff, and he conflates carbon dating with radiometric dating over and over in the film. No, but rocks were never alive, so rocks can never use carbon dating to be rocks.
Correct.
So he in the film they talk about how rocks can't be old because of carbon dating. Then I have clips of him in another video where he's explaining to his audience why carbon dating can't be used for rocks. So in the film,
was that Baumgartner?
Which is going to go broad, he's deliberately misrepresenting what carbon dating is and doesn't talk about why it could never be used for a rock. And yet,
I think that was either Baumgartner or Jackson.
Because I have video clips of him explaining to another audience why carbon dating can't be used for rocks. So there's just those are two tiny examples of being dishonest. That's all. I was just gonna, you were asking.
Have you know though, Christian? In the movie Noah, there were rock people that helped clear the forest. Build the ark.
We can't carbon date.
And that's
just saying.
No, I understand what you're saying.
Okay, we're going to let him respond, and then we're going to go to Trevor, and then David, and then Aron. That's the order that we're going. So, Christian, you can
by the way, I have to go. So,
Dr.
I want to thank you. I want to thank you,
guys.
Hold on. Aron's going to wait, Aron.
I want to thank you and Garte for giving the description of peer review, because that was necessary. The creationist people that I argue with all the time never have any clue what the hell peer review is. So that was really necessary for two Christian scientists to give an explanation of what that is.
It's hard to do.
So I appreciate that. Thank you so much.
People don't understand what an ordeal it is. So, okay, thanks a lot, guys.
Well, thank you for your time.
Yeah, thanks for coming in.
I'll see you later.
Thanks, buddy.
It's amazing.
Okay, now we're gonna bring Cy Ten Bruggencate in Dr. Maze's spot. So while we get that set up, let's go over to.
Is there some way to backhand Kyle from here?
I'm just watching Aron's face. That's all that I want. That's all that. Okay, go ahead, Trevor. Actually, no, I'm sorry, Trevor. He needs to respond to what was said from Paul, and then we'll go to you, Trevor.
Right.
I don't want to get too backed up. So go ahead.
Okay, so the two scientists I wanted to talk about was Marcus R. Ross for paleontology and Andrew Snelling. Now, with Marcus R. Ross, he starred in Is Genesis History? Oh my gosh, no laughing, come on. Okay, Is Genesis
I'm
History?
laughing if you're bringing up Ross.
Okay,
and you're bringing up Snelling, so you got two failures to start with.
I know. Failures. Okay. When it comes to Marcus
go, Christian.
R. Ross,
Just talk, man. Just talk.
When he was working on his dissertation in college, he had to go along with the deep time on Earth paradigm in order for his dissertation to even go through. So he said, so what Marcus said is, I had to assert millions of years in my dissertation because if I asserted thousands of years, I would have never gotten my PhD because I keep saying this, I would have gotten raked over the coals for it. And when it comes to Andrew Snelling, when he asserted that, millions of years during some of his published work, but then he went back to young Earth creationism, you're thinking, well, he was just dishonest. No, he was trying to earn respect within the scientific community. And is that lying? Yes, I'll assert that, fine. But he later went on and said, I had to assert millions of years because if I asserted thousands of years from the start, I never would have gotten the scientific respect or my PhD that I have ever had. So that's what a lot of college students have to go through now. They have to hide their young Earth creationist all throughout their PhD.
But I give you an example of Terry Mortensen, who understands a topic and went on a movie screen to hundreds of thousands of people and deliberately mistaught that topic. How is that not lying? What's the excuse for that when we have him in other lectures explaining it correctly?
Okay, well, I don't know about that case. I'm going to be complete. I don't know about that case. You'll have to show me on your YouTube channel, if you don't mind.
Yep.
I don't know about Terry Mortensen, but that's my answer for Ross and Snelling, is that they had to fabricate, they had to insert millions of years, they had to insert millions of years into the research in order to gain respect in the scientific community. That's my answer.
How about this? They had to insert that because that's the only way the shit works out. For example, if I was to, let's say I was working on a PhD and I had to do my dissertation, right? And I had to go in front of a review board, and I have had to actually go through a review board of sorts when I did my nuclear training, and I had 2 nuclear engineers and a few other people. I had to actually give an orientation of what the material was to them, and they had to sign off that I was qualified. It took 4 freaking hours. It's not a fun thing, so I can imagine what it's like for a PhD. But the reason I got my qualifications is because I demonstrated a proficiency based upon what is actually true, right? So if you're saying that they had to like make up stuff to play the game or something, anybody that is in science would go, well, yeah, but you know what? There's a problem there. That's what a PhD thesis is for. They try to poke holes into that thesis. Matter of fact, you have to sit there and they can ask you anything and you have to defend it, right? So what you're saying doesn't make any sense from a point of view, from a scientific point of view, because that's not how it works. It's simply not how it works.
Well, right. No, but when it comes to specifically Ross, I'm going to keep picking on Ross here. There's a commitment. I'm quoting Andrew Snelling here from Genesis History. There's a commitment to the millions of years in geology departments. And let's say, for example, I want to major in geology. I want to get my PhD in geology, but I'm a young Earth creationist. And so I'm thinking, well, that thesis will never hold up on the dissertation board. No professor is ever going to let me get my degree. I need to hide it. I need to play the game. And as soon as I get my PhD, through all the education and research that I had, I secretly got all the evidence for a young Earth. I didn't tell anybody because if I did, I'd lose my chances of to getting a degree. As soon as I get my PhD, then...
Okay.
How so?
Trevor, by all means, talk about Marcus Ross for us, please.
Yeah, Marcus Ross actually did a really amazing mosasaur paper in 2006 for GSA, in which he, basically shows the evolutionary path of mosasaurs. So there's one strike against him on that. He also did a lot of Cretaceous work, which is 65 million years old. Now, what you're saying is that the only way to do this. The only way for a young Earth creationist to get any sort of reality behind their name is to hide their material and go through the paces. You do realize that the Answers in Genesis debater, Dr. Jeanson, today has publicly stated that he got his PhD just to make himself more believable in Answers in Genesis, just to give them another PhD on their list. This is an incredibly common thing. They can fake it all they want. The problem is you're wrong. They're not grabbing their evidence for a young Earth and hiding it. There is no evidence for a young Earth. Ross himself has completely refuted himself with his mosasaur paper. Evolution's a fact thanks to that paper and mosasaurs. I mean, for him to go... Right? Yeah, exactly.
What is it? He's a young Earth creationist, and he accepts it. He's like, there's overwhelming evidence for evolution, but I'm still young.
Oh yeah, I have an amazing one. Sorry, Christian, one that actually blows your entire hypothesis of needing to hide and play the game out of the water. It's a woman called, oh fuck, why did I just blank on her? Mary Schweitzer. Mary Schweitzer. Yeah, Schweitzer.
Oh yeah,
who I had on too.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The young Earth, she is a young Earth creationist, or at least a very, very devout Christian.
No.
She's an
old. She is not a young Earth.
She's an old Earth creationist.
She's an old Earth creationist.
She was a young Earth creationist, and she started listening in on Jack Horner's lectures, and then she became an old Earth creationist.
But she's still very devout in her religion. But she's never hid
evolution now.
She's exactly.
But she accepts evolution.
She's still a Christian. She accepts evolution. She's perfectly fine. She's never hid any of that. And in fact, all of her soft tissue material being used by young Earth creationists, she speaks out directly against all of them. There are plenty of people who are theists, who are Christians, who are of all religions, that do just fine in academics, know what they're studying, and going along perfectly with their lines. They don't just... They're the only ones that do this I have to hide it bullshit are all the ones from AIG and ICR and Creation Ministries and all that garbage. And the only reason why they're doing that is in order to pad their stats. So one more PhD in electrical engineering can call me a fraud, and they can go fuck themselves because of it.
We gotta go to David next, and then Aron, you're after David.
Then next. I'm sorry. Yeah, right. David.
So,
next. Sorry, Aron.
I'll approach this from a slightly different angle, right? I'm not going to try to refute science with you because there's other scientists here who can adequately do that very eloquently. But what I will say is this. I used to be at one point, maybe when I was like 12 or 15 or somewhere in that range, a young Earth creationist. I kind of bought into it. I had an interest in science. I seen some of the things about tree rings and radio halos that sounded sciencey enough to keep me somewhat convinced for a short period of time. But I abandoned those beliefs pretty quickly after actually looking at the evidence, but more so after having a background in magic and in psychology. Because what there does seem to be a propensity amongst Christians, generally speaking, particularly professional ones that do speaking, or faith healers, or people who want all your money and sell Jim Baker buckets and all this kind of thing, is rampant dishonesty, right? If you study magic, as I did, and you look at any faith healers out there, you see the exact, simple, age-old, highly manipulative techniques playing out again and again, and it's not something that they are doing by accident, right? This is something that happens again and again, specifically designed to take advantage of people who don't know, to deceive, to fool, to make money, and to control, right? And this can be demonstrated throughout the religion. Now, you can point at those people and say, oh, well, they're not following the Bible. And that's well and good. Of course, they're not, sure, if you want to take that approach. But the reality is, is any time that there is any claim that I've ever seen made in support of an evidence for any sort of supernatural or a demonstration of healing or prayer working or anything, it is so easily dismissed as either willful ignorance or confirmation bias, or just direct dishonesty again and again and again. And it's irrefutable, right? So you can poke at the science, you can deny the 90-something% of scientists that agree on what the facts actually are, and take the side of the religion that has a ton of dishonest people who are literally causing people to die, to not take medicine, to distrust things. But it's a terrible position to take. What?
Aron?
Creationism is never blamed for that.
We're getting an echo.
Oh, I blame it for that.
Somebody's got their...
I'm directly blaming creationism for killing people because of the sorts of distrust of science that it promotes.
Because these people who do the faith healing, no, the people who do the faith healing and the demonology, the exorcisms and all like that, they are creationists too, as are the flat earthers and the geocentrists and most of the anti-vaxxers and all of that stuff. Yeah,
I am not an anti-vaxxer. I'm not a flat earther. I'm not a geocentrist. I do not assert. I do not identify myself to any of those three things that you mentioned.
But you have about the same amount of evidence they do. You just have a claim.
It leads into it. Yeah. By the way, we're trying to get some other people here.
I wouldn't put flat Earth on him now.
No, I wouldn't put flat Earth on it. But you know what? It's all, to me, it's the same thing. I don't think here it's like you flat Earth and young Earth creationism. I mean, you're talking about such a minuscule difference between impossibilities because of the bullshit.
Yeah, but flat earthers are creationists. Not all creationists are flat earthers, but all flat earthers are creationists.
Yeah, yes. Well, the vast majority.
Pretty much.
I can't think of one that isn't.
Get on board. I will get on board and attack the flat Earth theory with you. I'll get on board and attack.
And then you'll have the same problem. You'll have the same problem that I do. Let's say that you're getting your degree to become an obstetrician. And you realize that you're never going to get your degree. Okay, so you're going to become an obstetrician, only you believe in the stork theory. And that's going to be a problem that for you to get your PhD if you believe in the stork and you're going to go to work in a pediatric clinic. Huh?
What's wrong with the stork?
That's the problem with young Earth creationism. It's the same thing as you're going to be an astronomer and you believe in the flat Earth. Same thing. It's just like as absurd.
Speaking of flat Earth,
if you want,
speaking of flat Earth,
if you want to be a hey Red, if you want to be a doctor, right, and you putting forth this narrative that the brain pumps blood, right? Well, how far do you think you're going to get on that? So when you're talking about young Earth creationism, the stuff that they're putting out is demonstrably wrong. And as you get more knowledgeable in college, you'll learn things about biology, geology, physics that you have no idea in the world what's going on now. And you'll go, there is no way that position's tenable because of what you've learned in your academic learning. I mean, I'm telling you right now, the main thing that wholly debunks young Earth creationism, I mean, obviously Aron is going to go from the biological side, but I tell you right now, it is, to me, physics. It is just untenable. It's not tenable to have a young Earth creationist position because you start changing things like radiometric decay. You start changing things like the fine structure constant. You start changing things like electromagnetic permeability and permittivity. You start destroying atoms. You cannot have atoms if young Earth creationism is correct. Period. It destroys all life. It is self-refuting prima facie. That's how I look at it. But biology, obviously, is bullshit.
And Steve, and let me tag on to that, Christian, because here's what I see. Okay, you have in this hangout alone, so much knowledge and so much experience, not only in the religious aspect, but also the scientific aspects. You've got guys who have toured the world debating. Guys that have run organizations, written books, been on TV with Nat Geo, the History Channel, the Discovery Channel. These people in here in this room, and the ones that are not, they left. There's so much knowledge. Like, you should be soaking this up, especially since you said yourself that you don't know the subjects that well, and that's why you're sending people to other people. This should be a field day for you because you have so much experience in this room that you can draw from, and good experience, proven experience that have actually done things that can be backed up by facts. So I wouldn't fight it. This right here is probably, I mean, even for me, it's one of the coolest moments because you've got so many people that I look up to in this room.
To what Kyle's saying,
yes, Dave.
is don't look at being proven wrong as losing. Look at that as a win, right? Like I had to learn that when I was younger. That
just keep learning.
I would not be right as often as I am if not for all the times I was proven wrong.
We do it all the time with Dave too, by the way.
Just keep learning.
So, right?
Honestly,
you are really wrong.
I highly respect Mr. Ross.
Just go watch Aron Ra's videos on Foundation Foster Christian.
Yeah.
And I was going to say Paul was the other person too. Go watch Paul's videos. Either one of them.
I have,
the amount of information you're exposed to is ungodly.
Oh, you have? What do you think about them?
Just a ridiculous amount.
Well, as a matter of for two things. One, with Mr. Ra's video, how geology disproves Noah's flood. I commented on one of your videos. It's you have to check. It's one of the newer comments. I had a bit of an online debate with another one of your supporters. You have to check that out. It's a pretty new comment on that video. And number two, when it came to one of Paulogia's videos, I forget which one, but I sent him a Facebook message with an Answers in Genesis article saying a creationist's power to predict. And Paulogia made the assertion that young Earth creationism cannot make any viable, valid scientific predictions, let alone be proven right. And I sent him an article saying, unfortunately, I'm going to have to prove you wrong on that one. Here's a list of creationist predictions made by Russell Humphreys, Baumgartner, Snelling, and here are the results of those predictions.
Right, which we talked about here. But go ahead.
Yeah. And I've seen a list of creationist predictions too, that we'll never see one species evolve into another species. But then again, we did after that creationist.
They did back in the 70s, actually. Yeah.
Yeah, and then
promoted that.
You know,
what do you mean by species? Hold on. What do you mean by species?
Speciation.
Like the family group?
Don't you dare say kind. Don't you dare say kind.
What do I mean by species?
I wasn't going to say kind.
Do I mean family or do I mean species? When I say species, do I mean family or do I mean species? I'm pretty clear. When I say species, I mean species.
Speciation.
Yeah, so when a creationist tells me, you know, back in the 1970s, that we're never going to see one species evolve into another species, and then it turns out that we do see exactly that dozens of times. That's happened. That's documented. So that was a creationist prediction that failed.
I agree.
And then we're never going to see anything that has a half a wing, because what would the value of a half a wing be? You either have a whole wing to go fly with, or you don't have any wing at all. And then we have the fossil record riddled with half wings, because it turns out that they're better for insulating a larger clutch of eggs. Look at that. So we found the half wing. And there was another creationist prediction that failed. And you're never going to find the missing link that Darwin predicted, except that we found it 44 years ago. And then we found hundreds of individuals from that species. And she's just one species out of dozens of other species that we found since then. So every creationist
disagrees with you.
We would never find a star being born either. We found stars being born.
Stephen Jay Gould.
No, I'm waiting.
No,
Christian.
Stephen Jay Gould.
Stephen Jay Gould disagreed with me in 1974, which was the same year that Australopithecus afarensis was discovered. Update your records a wee bit, I think. That was 44 years ago. He complained that the fossil record... Stephen Jay Gould disagreed 44 years ago, saying that the fossil record was incredibly sparse then, not entirely absent, but sparse. Almost every transitional species we found has been since then. We've been in a paleontological boon since the 1990s, such that we've filled almost every niche. The only thing that I know of that we don't have all the transitional species for, all of them, the only thing that I know of that is still absent is I predict that scorpions did not arise out of arachnids, that they are actually Mixopterician ripterids. So the only thing missing is the link there. That's it. We got everything else.
Well, we're missing Pam Pryor, right? I mean, Pam Pryor. We have Paralithicus Catalonicus.
We've got Dryopithecus fontana. We've got excuse me, the Dryopithecus, like a whole. We've got a clade of 40 different species.
Right.
Well, I'm sorry, what?
But for human evolution, because that's what the creationists love. Trevor, I mean, we found when they just tried to find a common ancestor to all members of the great apes, the Homodia, they found Paralipithecus catalonicus back in like 2000 something in Spain. They predicted that was going to happen. They looked for markers just like they did with Neil Schubin and Tiktaalik. Now we haven't found Prior yet, which would be the common ancestor for human and chimps. But you know what? Just a matter of time. But we've done these things, Christian. We've said, hey, this is what species would we look for that has these types of attributes, and where would we find it at? And they've gone down and they've done it. It's documented. Go look up Paralipithecus catalonicus. It's
so every creationist prediction, utter failure, all of them. And this is the important thing. When scientists, actual scientists, whether they're Christian or whether they're atheists, when scientists are doing science, they come up with a hypothesis. They come up with a way to disprove the hypothesis. There's no way to prove the hypothesis right. There's things that, you know, if we are right, then we should expect these results, and maybe we'll get those results, but that won't necessarily mean that what you're predicting is absolutely right.
That's what Dr.
But there's
Humphreys
always,
did.
but there's always a way to prove it. But there is always a way to prove it wrong. So in every hypothesis, it has to be falsifiable. If I'm wrong, if creationism is wrong, then we do this experiment. This will prove creationism wrong. Name me the time, the scientist, the creationist, whoever said this is what will prove creationism wrong.
You got to admit, Christian, it's a beautiful thing to watch Aron work, isn't it? Even on your side, it's a beautiful thing to watch.
Yes,
yes,
absolutely. Absolutely.
Darwin himself said that there was a number of things that would prove him wrong. He named a couple of different things that would prove him wrong, and he was vindicated on both of them. And one of them being the transitional species that the creationists are still trying to nail him for. He was vindicated on that while he was still alive.
So Reds, what say you, sir? We haven't heard from Reds, and he's popped in. So let's say hello to Reds. Christian, are you familiar with Reds?
I am not actually.
Okay, well, look, let me explain something to you, okay? He is the Aron Ra of Flat Earth, so it's a good thing you don't hold the...
He's a much bigger asshole than Aron. Are you kidding?
I do not hold a flat earth. I am not a flat earth. I am not a flat earther.
Okay, I need another beer.
Look, okay, I just heard the word flat earth and I showed up. I think I'm way out of my element here, okay? And so it's like, oh, so somebody said flat earth sense is tingling. Okay, gotta go. And that's what happened. I knocked over like 6 people in a really nice grocery store, and this is what I come down like, oh crap. Hi.
Reds has the honor of holding the record here at Non Sequitur for the most views. We topped out at over 1,100 with him live in his last debate
about
here.
Almost
so,
13.
Okay, so to that, can I just say something?
We'll do it again Friday.
Well, again, yes, of course, but I just need to say something very professional about that one thing. Okay, just very professional, just calm and collected. Yes, yes, in your face, Sci-10. Yes, yeah.
By the way, Red's Rhetoric is one of the most humble people you'll ever meet.
What the fuck are you talking about?
I almost
and
got
no one will ever
face.
Somewhere,
this is the guy.
Given
who told
that, me, given that all realities are technically possible in the multiverse theory, somewhere there is a reality where Red's Rhetoric is humble. But this is not
That's
it.
not true.
Wait.
No, wait.
This is the guy that.
Not true, David.
This is the guy that called me and said. Oh yeah, but Red's called me and he goes, "Look, I'm having this debate with Awake Souls. If you want it to happen, at some point in the debate, you are going to wear a wife beater." Didn't ask, didn't say, "Hey, I've got this funny idea." Just said you're going to wear a wife beater, and that was the debate where Kyle wore a wife beater.
And he did.
So you know who calls the shots around here.
Multiverse, I think, is 10 to the.
By the way,
Dave, multiverse is 10 to the 500th power, while ontological multiple possible worlds are infinite. So there's a difference there.
In other words,
Sorry, I'm reading the cosmic landscape. I love Susskind. What do you want?
Thank you for clarifying that, Steve.
Yeah.
Like you just ruined my
I
joke.
love Susskind.
So I'm the Aron Ra of Flat Earth. Wow, what an honor. Maybe I can run for government office. That'd be great.
And not get it?
I think you
probably have some extra support seeing as NASA shill.
Yes, I am. I mean,
nothing
just look at my avatar.
Backing, sure. Have NASA support you.
I mean, after all, look at my avatar. It's everything that you want in a politician.
I know some young Earth creationists in NASA, but okay.
Who are you debating Friday, Reds? Can you tell us about that guy so that we can kind of I'm not familiar with the guy.
I'm debating a guy who goes by the name of Southern Israelite. In other words, he's a philosophical nut job that has the argument of but Mahalabuk to say that the Earth is flat. Basically, if you have observations from reality that show that their assertion of a flat Earth is false, then reality is lying to you, and the Bible is right, because Romans chapter 3,
That's exactly what
4.
Answers in Genesis says, that no evidence of any kind can ever contradict their interpretation of their sacred fables.
In a debate, with Bill Nye the Science Guy, they were asked a simple question: what would it take to convince you, the other way? And Bill Nye actually listed some things that if you show that to him, that would actually make him pause and be like, wow, holy crap, there's something here. But then when that same question was asked to the opposing side, whose name I will not mention because fuck that guy, it was, it was more like nothing. Nothing would ever convince him that, hey, there's actually something here. There's actually something tangible, something that I can chew on that doesn't taste like garbage.
I can list some.
Okay, go for
Reds,
it.
You got a challenger. Go ahead, Christian.
Do it.
I got a challenger.
Okay.
Great.
Yeah. Okay. I don't know if you're aware. I'm the young Earth creationist in this one. So, what would convince me? Okay. That, well, for one thing, the universe is eternal. If the universe is eternal, there's no need for God. I can let you know that right now. But because the universe has a beginning, I can go off the cosmological argument on that one. But
you mean the
okay.
cosmos,
no,
right?
we don't know that the universe
Not sure
has
how
a
that
beginning. We just know that
Hang on. As the new guy here, all of y'all, remember what Kyle said. We all know who calls the shots here, right?
Yeah, David.
I gave up a long time ago.
David has far more power here than any of us. Okay, don't kid yourself. Not McGinnis, but the God, David.
Do you know the simple flaw with the cosmological argument?
I've heard of many critiques of the cosmological argument.
No, there is a fatal flaw to it in which you cannot make any solid standings. You can't have a solid assertion on it and actually be backed up by something. When it comes to cosmological argument, it actually goes beyond what we have the capability of studying. We can only study so far into the past before we hit a barrier. So basically, we have a sample size of 0. If you are deriving your argument, if your argument is placed where we have a sample size of 0, then your argument does not hold any sway next to anyone else's argument, whether it be God, Yahweh, or unicorn pixie farts. It doesn't matter. We have a sample size of 0 in that region, if there even is a region at all. Because again, we have a sample size of 0.
Okay, well, hold on. When it comes to that critique, one, you're interpreting that argument in a very weird, very unorthodox way. Because the way I see the cosmological argument is, you know what's going to come. Universe has a beginning that begins to exist as a cause, so the universe has a cause. Okay, so what are the
go on, but
what is the evidence?
Hold on. Wait a minute.
I'm not raising my hand. I'm just shaking my head.
Okay. So we're saying, okay, so what makes up the universe? And I'm going to be very simple here. I'll admit, what makes up the universe? Time, space, and matter. Okay, so whatever caused the universe to come into existence had to have caused time, space, and matter to come into existence. So hold on.
We have a timeless, spaceless, immaterial, unembodied mind that created all things. I'm very familiar with this argument, but the problem is that your flaw lies in the very first thing you said. Everything that begins to exist has a cause. Where is the evidence that everything that begins to exist has a cause?
Do you know of anything to the contrary?
Yes.
Yes.
Before I answer that, we do. But Aron, I want you to go next if you can, because I would literally want to.
I'm back.
I'm actually keen to hear Steve's answer, but I was just going to say that, as I understand Big Bang, it is based on multiverse theory, or at least now is, at least that's preferred, and that we are just one of many bubbles arising in the bottom of a saucepan, among other things. When you have supermassive gravity, then that slows down time. So gravity of the amount that we're talking about would bring time to a stop. Which means,
and that is the solution to the distance starlight problem.
If you go back in time, you know, to the point of the Big Bang, you reach a point where time slows down to where 1 second equals infinity when t equals 0, which means that the universe is both eternal and has a beginning.
Yeah, that's exactly what you look at the reason why
even if that were not the case, the universe still flooded in here from somewhere else. From our perspective, because the way I see it is,
okay,
I don't know. I'm saying that this is the model. As I understand it, this is fourth dimensional matter filling up a three-dimensional space-time.
Christian, do you know what a theory of time? Two things, because you asked me a question on what the examples would be. I'd be happy to give them. But do you know what theory of time the Kalam uses? It's predicated on A theory of time.
Yeah, A theory. A theory versus B theory.
Well, I know space and time are the same thing. I know space and time are the same thing.
That's Minkowski space. The way we look at space, the space-time, is a four-dimensional representation. It used to be thought of three-dimension, one temporal. Okay, that was called a neo-Lorentzian model. But as Aron pointed out, the Minkowski version is such that it's actually a four-dimensional manifold, and then we have three-dimensional representations from that. But the A theory of time is what the Kalam relies on because of what the word beginning. Okay, but physicists generally go to B theory of time, where past, present, and future have no definite article. They're undefined, or I'm trying to think of the word. They're like when we say a specific time, like 3 o'clock on Saturday, right?
They're unknown.
Well, it's not known. It's just they're unspecified, I guess you can say. But you had asked me for an example of a cause without effect. Okay, so wrap your head around this, because this is going to probably hurt you. But there are causes without effect, because on the Copenhagen interpretation of quantum mechanics, there are certain things like spontaneous fission and weak nuclear decay modes that do not satisfy what's called the Bell inequality. And the Bell inequality simply states that you must have, for any local hidden variable model, it must solve for all possible states of the system and make predictions. There is no possible hidden variable model that exists that does that. Okay, so when you're talking about something like the Kalam for the cause, there is no cause on the quantum level for those things that I talked about, the spontaneous fission, because there's no information, literally no information in the system that's called a local hidden variable to be there. No, this is quantum mechanics. Okay, now there are other models out there called pilot wave theory. When you go to Bohmian mechanics, pilot wave theory is another type of model that does allow for hidden variables, but only on the global, not the local. So if you ever get a chance, look at local realism, and basically the shit's all over local realism. And so the fact remains is there are things that happen that do not have a cause. Trevor, want to dive into that real quick? Am I wrong?
No. I'm just laughing when you said it just shits on. That was just
great. Okay.
Like, I have my own. Yeah, it completely does. Just
going on. Christian, I believe you said that there were 3 things that would prove to you that creationism is wrong. We only heard the first thing and too eagerly jumped in to disprove it. What are the other 2 things we can disprove here tonight, and that will cause you to still say that you believe in creationism no matter what?
I'm muting my mic on this one.
First of all, I wanted to go back to that first one. So I just want to wrap my head around this. So quick question: is time eternal? I just want to say that. Is time eternal? Yes or no?
Okay, no. I tell you what.
Only in the context if as I said, if supermassive gravity of the entire the singularity being the mass of everything, once gravity begins, it is equivalent to the mass of everything, and that slows down time. Well, time hasn't even begun yet, so at that time it would have been slowed down so that 1 second equals infinity when t equals 0, which means that it would have to be infinite, which means it would have to be eternal. So in that sense, yes,
there is no time.
Because when time begins, we have supermassive gravity, which stretches out time to where 1 second equals infinity.
No, Trevor, I know you. Trevor, you want to jump in here because I got to add on this time thing, but I think
no, I really don't. It's at this point that I kind of want to scream.
I'm already there. So I tell you what, Christian, look at how about we do this? How about
Trevor to jump in? I want to know why Trevor wants to scream, because it might be about me. I don't know. Please, Trevor, what is it?
No, it's not. No, because again, some people may say I'm speaking over my pay grade, but like quantum mechanics is kind of a fun thing with me. Cool, huh? I mean, it's absolutely correct. But Stephen and Aron, you're both absolutely right. But I'm kind of laughing at the absurdity that we're trying to do this, because Christian, honestly, you're a freshman in college. I get it. A majority of us are older than your entire education put together.
Speak for yourself, Trevor.
We got a
millennial.
I'm old. Okay.
How about this? Hey,
hush you.
Trevor, why don't you put it in your? Oh, I'm sorry, Trevor.
I was going to say, I'd really like to hear one of the other things, because Christian is like, I'm sorry, I don't think you're going to grasp.
He's not going to stand time. He's not going to stand time very well. But that's why I wanted to get
it's like. That's why I wanted to take it on a different version.
Well, let me just
get it out.
Yeah, go for it, I just wanted to attack it from a different angle. You asked me a question. Do you know of anything that exists without a cause? Let's hypothetically said, or I said, no, I don't know of anything that has a cause. How does that help you answer the question? Where is the evidence that everything that begins to exist has a cause?
Well, I think you kind of just said it yourself, because if we know of nothing, that doesn't. Hold on, don't sigh. Hold on.
That's an argument for
ignorance.
Let me handle this, guys. I understand you guys are very smart. I'm really appreciative of that. Let me get this. Let me get this.
Okay.
I'm asking nicely.
I'm too sober for this.
Just finish him already.
Yeah, I had to break out the rum.
Christian,
right,
please.
That's a good idea.
Christian,
thank you for that idea.
I want everyone to start drinking. Go.
Yes.
I got alcohol here. I could, but you don't want. But let Red's finish, because I want to add on this. I saw Aron does too. So Red's finish what you're saying on this. Please.
Let him get it out. Go, Christian.
It was a question to him.
This is what I'm trying to say.
Okay.
This is what I'm trying to say. We know of nothing. We know of nothing that begins to exist without a cause. So would it therefore be unreasonable to infer that everything that begins to exist has a cause?
No, you're answering the question with a question. Okay, you're making an assumption that everything that begins to exist has a cause. I'm asking you, what is your evidence as the person that's making the assertion that everything that begins to exist, as in you need an example of something beginning to exist, and the cause of that thing being able to become existent. So what is your piece of evidence that allows you to make that assertion with such confidence?
Why is it more than just assumption?
So you're saying why? So you're saying why is this not an assumption? Like, what's my evidence for this?
No, why is it an assumption? There's no law of cause and effect in physics. I can tell you right now. It's just an assumption based on observation. There's no hard fast rule. So why you make that?
You're making an assertion here. Everything that begins to exist has a cause. That's the very first thing you said. Well, in order to say that, you must have something pretty substantial that gives you confidence in order to make that statement, correct?
Correct. And what gives me that confidence is that I know of no case, I know of no observation, and neither does anybody on Earth that would.
I give you two. Hang on, come on.
Well, hang on. Let's hypothetically say. Let's hypothetically say that I did not give him those. Do you? Now I'm going to ask you a separate question. Do you know what an argument from ignorance is?
Yes, it's similar to the God of the Gaps.
Similar to the God of the Gaps. Okay. Then here's what I want you to do. I'm not going to make any more assertions. I advise you, after the non sequitur is finished processing and it's up on YouTube, rewatch it and then ask yourself, am I guilty of making an argument from ignorance? That's all I'm going to say.
I'm going to go get a drink, but before I do, I just want to leave real quick. Yes, you haven't said anything yet, so of course, Paul.
Okay, so all I wanted to do. So I want to rephrase your argument and see if you can provide with me any alternate examples in a similar way. So I'm going to rephrase your argument. Everything that begins to exist is a rearrangement of something that existed before. The universe began to exist. Therefore, the universe is a rearrangement of something that existed before.
That actually has a name. It's called mirological. That's called mirological nihilism, by the way.
Oh,
it
good.
actually has a name, Paul. Yeah, mirological
so can you
nihilism.
think of something that? Can you think of anything that began to exist that wasn't a rearrangement of something that existed before?
Well, no. When I'm talking about the universe, I'm talking about all of time, all of space, and all of matter. So
yeah, but no, but you understand that we think of the cosmos. We don't use this current universe to mean matter, for example. So we think this universe at the Big Bang, time and space started. Our incarnation of time and space started at the Big Bang, but we don't know if there was other incarnations. So
at least
so
the
similar to the same argument. I just want you to think about the same argument. Can you think of anything that began to exist that isn't a rearrangement of something else that already existed? Can you point me to an example?
In other words, there's only certain.
Just say good point. Just say good point.
Yeah,
well, that's where I was going with that too, because the only thing that we know that even actually could be said to begin to exist, would be the universe at large.
Okay.
So
no, guys. No, okay, guys.
If the
Yeah,
universe
I do
began to.
Hold on.
I was going to say, if the universe began to exist, the universe has a cause. It's circular at that point. You're basically saying the universe began to exist. Everything got You're filling it in with a void. It's vacuum.
Okay. No. I see what you're saying.
Do you? Chris, can I tell you two things before I get my drink now? It's just two quick things. You can go look them up.
Hey, can I have my old logo back?
Sure.
Yeah, I like this logo better. Okay, first of all, when you talk about cause, if you go look at Aristotelian logic, there's 4 types of causes, not just one. So there's a danger with equivocation, and you should look to see those 4 types of causes. You have efficient cause, formal cause, material cause, and final cause, and they all mean very specific things. You also should go look up what's called reductionism versus Platonic when it comes with respect to time, because if you don't understand what reductionism is and Platonic forms, and when it comes to time, you're not going to understand what time is to begin with. Because if you want to look at time, all it is basically is an illusion. Because all we're doing is we're saying we're recognizing there's a change of some kind, and that change is we're marking by what we're calling time. But if there's no change in the universe, none whatsoever, a reductionist approach would say that time doesn't exist at that point. A Platonic approach would be that there is time, you just not passing. So you have to look at what it means to be time, because if there is no change in the entire universe, if all motion ceased to exist, would there be time? And you have to look at it from a philosophical point of view as which way you want to look at it. So when you start talking about time, it's a hell of a lot more complicated than what you think, I assure you. There you go. And I'm going to get a drink.
Well, in Wyoming, my time, it is 11 o'clock, and I got school tomorrow. So I just want to say, Mr. Ra, thank you for all that you've said. Paulogia, thank you. Trevor, thank you. Everybody, thank you for inviting me in this dialogue.
Thanks, Hidden.
Or this conversation.
Oh, you're muted, Aron. You're muted, Aron.
Aron, you're muted.
Yeah, Aron, we can't hear you. Unmute yourself.
Yep, here I am being polite and muting myself and then forgetting. Christian, you did say that you were going to accept my challenge.
Yes, I
I'll
did.
need you to can you throw your email address in the chat, and then I can send you the details of that, because there is some interaction,
Yes.
I have to get you, I have to kind of like bring you up to speed on the basics, make sure you understand those basics, and then move on to the next level. And that's the way that works. All right, I appreciate it.
Did you get my email?
Coming into a follow-up after you've completed Aron's challenge.
Oh yeah, and one other thing, it has to be in a public venue. So I mean, I generally use it to do the leagueofreason.org. Excuse me, the theleagueofreason.co.uk, and I'll send you the link when I send you the email.
Okay. Now, did you get my email in the chat?
I did, and I've got it saved.
Is your name is Trevor? That's what it is.
Christian.
No,
Christian.
It's Christian.
No,
Christian.
Trevor's the great bearded one up there.
Okay, the great beard.
There's like 4 of us.
I have a great beard. Come on.
Can you imagine what a great
Only creationist in the room. I need a name.
Christian. That's his name, Christian.
Okay, Christian.
Yeah.
Christian. Okay, Christian.
Yes.
Okay, I actually do want to thank you for one thing. Thank you for not being a flat earther. Thank you so much for not being a flat earther. Thank you for not being a flat earther.
Small things.
It does my heart so good that you're not a flat earther.
To quote Ken Ham, observational science can disprove that one.
I will say this, Christian. I admire your spirit, man. You came in here against 9 people and you didn't back down. So you came in 9 deep and you didn't back down. So I admire your as wrong as you are. I admire your spunk.
Yeah, Christian, one other thing. I have a stupid, crazy, busy schedule right now, so I'm not going to be able to deal with it very quickly. I have to, like, tomorrow. Tomorrow I have to go to West Virginia, for example, and then shortly after that I have to do a speaking tour around Texas. And I mean, it's crazy, stupid, busy. But I will send you an email, and I'll check it like daily. But it won't be like a same time chat, because it can't be. I don't have the time to do that. But
of course,
I will give you the time that you deserve.
Okay, awesome.
Use it wisely, Christian. You have a golden opportunity right here. Use it wisely.
I think the only reason he's offering is because you did hold your own. Well, I mean, you're wrong and everything, but I mean, you came in and talked to like 8 or 9 people that pretty much could destroy these things in their sleep. So
can I get that jab in, Steve?
Now, just to double check, when you say public venue, are you implying that we're gonna have a online debate on the theory of evolution?
Oh yeah, you're gonna have a big.
No, I wouldn't call it
no.
I wouldn't call it a debate, but I need a public archive, so that I have a link to show. Here's where I talked to this person, and on this particular board that I just mentioned, I have a number of prior linked to. Yeah, it's a discussion wherein that we can put in links, we can put in pictures, diagrams, whatever, and it makes a lot more sense than the 2 of us just talking, and it's better than, say, like in the comments of a YouTube video or Twitter or something like that. This is a sane location to put in that volume of information.
Okay, so this won't be live, like a public live conversation per se. This was just
no.
Like a public.
I'd put in my post, or I'd create a blog, and I would check it every day to see if you've responded yet, and then you would check it every day to see if I've written a post back to you. I mean, it wouldn't be just not like a text. I understand. I have a busy schedule. You're a student. I expect you to have a busy schedule. It's September.
I do. Yes.
So, yeah. So I mean, I wouldn't labor you like that.
Yes.
Okay. Well,
I couldn't put you under that burden if I wanted to, because I don't have the time.
We've got to get these super chats out. We've got 2 videos to get super chats out. We got to read. So, Christian, thank you very much.
Make sure you get to school.
Thank you so much. Yes, I will. Paul, Trevor, everybody, thank you. I am honored.
Have a good night.
He's gone.
All right. Now that he's gone, let's talk shit. Okay. No, I'm just kidding. Okay, so let's.
At least he's not flat earther.
Yeah,
I'm very proud he's not a flat earther.
Coming on this show.
I do have to say, Aaron, or is it Aaron or Aron? I keep fucking it up. Aron. I'm terribly sorry. Forgive me. Aron. Right. I did think of one flat earther who is not a young earth creationist. He's just a general jackass. And he says Christ didn't exist. It's Eric Dubay.
Okay, so how does he think the universe existed? Or how does he think the earth
I have no idea. He's just a general asshole.
He's just a jackass.
Yeah, I knew Red would do that. I knew Red would do that.
Yep. I talked to Jeronism. I talked to Jeronism already on this show, and it turned out he is a creationist.
Listen.
Jeronism? Yeah, Jeronism is. Yep. Yeah, absolutely.
Listen. The thing is that on this show, Jeronism actually has a different name. He is now referred to as Red's bitch. So there you go.
Right.
Yeah, Eric Dubay literally does not believe nuclear fission works, which is something that I worked around for several years. It works. And by the way, correct me if I'm wrong, and I don't know if this is public, but it's going to be now, so I'm going to dox the shit out of it. Correct me if I'm wrong, but somebody in this hangout actually had somebody offer them to get a hold of Eric Dubay to have a debate, because, quote, Eric Dubay debates anyone, and that person was denied. Do anybody know who that person is?
Oh yeah, gee, I wonder. So Eric Dubay makes the claim that as you're gaining altitude, the horizon always rises to eye level. Well, I have this thing called a DJI Mavic Pro that showed that to be utter horseshit. So in the comments section, there was this one guy saying, "I have personal connections with Eric Dubay. You should debate him if you're man enough." And I'm like, get him to accept the debate, and I'll gladly do it. We can do it on the Non Sequitur show. And he replied with, I'm going to get him in 72 hours. He's going to be yours. He backed
Actually, he
out.
called you. What did he call you? He doesn't do debates with a whoopit or something.
Wigger.
Wigger.
The greatest. Let me tell you.
Do you know what a wigger is?
The greatest
you know what a wigger is?
to ever watch, guys. Go watch. Wait. Go watch Trevor Valle on Joe Rogan. Watching Eric Dubay with when he was on the Joe Rogan podcast is hilarious. Him and Joe are watching the Eric Dubay video. I believe it was on Dinosaurs, wasn't it?
Don't exist. It's about dinosaurs don't exist. It's his new money-making thing. See, my everything I've dug into Eric, this is all a money-making scheme for him to try and be like the vegan ninja rap guy, selling the occasional book. Everything I have found out about him is that he fled the United States under interesting circumstances, possibly because of a lawsuit or crime, to Thailand. His father and uncle were both actually Freemasons, and that he says are like the most evil thing ever. And yeah, he's the example of the crank magnet that will literally will say anything just to get attention. He will not debate anybody. I've attempted to do a structured debate with him twice. He backed out of a debate against Neil deGrasse Tyson on Joe Rogan. He backs out of everything.
Somebody backed out of a debate with Neil deGrasse Tyson?
Why? Why would you do that?
That would have been awesome. No kidding. But by the way,
I would debate Neil deGrasse Tyson on the consistency of bubble gum.
Like seriously, I would rather debate him and get slayed massively than to renege on the debate.
Yeah, absolutely. You know how it's like the amount of notoriety you would get alone. Look at what B.O.B. How many hours did that jackass sell? See, that's the new thing. I
lost to Neil deGrasse Tyson. Great. I lost in, it'd be great. But by the way, I got to say,
Frank Turek made an entire career out of losing a debate to. Frank Turek made an entire career out of losing a debate with Christopher Hitchens.
Well, I do because it was funny because Wigger has nothing to do with race. I know that's out there, but do you know what a Wigger is, Reds? A Wigger is a freaking tweaker. It's a meth head. That's what a Wigger is. That's what he means by that. It has nothing to do with race.
No, that's not what I've ever heard.
Is that the 21st century is that the new 21st century version of it? Because I tell you, in the 1980s, it meant something different.
A Wigger is a type of.
It meant something completely different.
Yeah,
I'm gonna say it's. I'm gonna say it's still that. I'm gonna say it's still that.
I'm gonna say you're wrong, Steve.
Yeah,
I'm not.
Steve, you're the one that says words can't change meanings. Come on.
I dare you. Right, no, but
the way he was using it. The way he was using it. You guys never heard the term Wigger? You guys don't know any meth heads? A Wigger is
why are we talking about this? This makes me uncomfortable. This word makes me uncomfortable.
They have to.
I've certainly heard about meth heads called Wiggers, but that's not what it meant.
Listen, everybody, listen.
Steve, can you explain to us what?
If a hangout that has all of these scientists and like geniuses in their fields deteriorates to the point where we now are talking about Wiggers, it's time to say goodnight. We have exhausted all possible possibilities of good conversation. It's time to thank everyone and say goodnight. So, does anybody have any final?
I just want to say, Trevor.
Sure, go ahead, Aron.
I do really want to talk to like somebody who does, as we mentioned before, the radioisotopic data, who can get on camera with familiarity with it and describe how it actually does work. And the reason that I want to do that is because I want to address some creationists who pretend to be scientists. There's a guy on the speaking circuit who pretends to be a scientist who says that radioisotopic dating, any of them, simply don't work because they're based on false assumptions.
I see.
Oh, that's right. Is there any particular radiometric dating you would like to do, or any at all?
I want to have somebody who can explain different types. You know, because I mean, everybody wants to go
like
to radiocarbon,
thorium, lead, argon, potassium, all that. Okay. Yeah, I'll see what I can. I mean, I know the basics of all of them. I've personally done carbon dating.
As do I, but as do I. But yeah, the thing is that the audience that I'm trying to address doesn't care about people who know it. I don't know, for whatever reason, they need to have somebody with their credentials explain it. Okay. And so I would preferably have somebody who actually does that with personal familiarity, because as we saw in tonight's debate, you know, the personal familiarity carries some weight.
Yeah, I'll talk to a few people at UCLA, UCLA, Berkeley, and SF that I know.
Can I plug something real quick?
Go.
Yes, of course.
Yeah. So Non Sequitur is going to be hosting this debate that I'm having with Southern Israelite, and if you all basically are thinking, you know, my desk is just, I hate this desk, I want to break it in half, that debate would be a good place, because you'll be using your head, but it is a good place to break your desk in half so you have an excuse to go to IKEA and replace it with that gorgeous furniture that you saw when you were just passing through. So Southern Israelite, as I was getting on, he is a guy that does not care what observations say. He only goes by the Bible, and he likes to think that he's a master at philosophy. There you go.
Yeah, I've seen him a couple times. He's a he's a piece of work.
Yeah, he's a Psi 10.
And
yeah.
Guys, you shouldn't have a desk left. So if you do have a desk that Red's talking about, it should have been broken long ago. Going back to the first time.
I really like this table. This is a really nice mission style table.
That's a good point.
It's good.
It is a nice table.
By the way,
so guys, go around. We're going to go around. Oh wait, Dave has just found some information. Let's see what this is.
Yep, that's still it.
I know what it says. I understand what people think it means in this regard. I'm telling you what it means in the drug world. Here in a book I just looked up.
Well, it means something different for me. I get it.
Steve, I'm going to quote this when you bring up atheism again.
In the drug world, the word he's most familiar with.
In the drug world. That's why I was saying in the drug world it means wigger. It means tweaker.
Just to make this clear for Eric Dubay.
Can you show me verification of that?
Listen. To make sure that Eric Dubay knows this, if I'm a wigger, he needs to listen to the music I listen to. So my favorite song is "Breaking Point" by the Browning. Top that shit.
Nice.
What is that? I've never heard of that.
How do I
do yourself a favor and listen? Yeah.
I thought it was
since I just opened this beer and I have another one and I have this whole bottle of Mammoth rum. Is there an after show?
Maybe
there could be.
No, man. Trevor,
if I can get these goddamn super chats out,
my ass is numb.
Then I'll start one on my channel maybe. But how do I can't screen share this.
Come on into Discord later.
You can't screen share on vMix. You can't screen share on vMix.
Right. So I got
calling in. David, right? Have a good one, guys.
Asta.
Okay, so go ahead and guys, before you leave, plug. We got. We're gonna read super chats, but you guys can go. That's completely fine. Before you go, plug your channel, your Patreon, whatever it is that you've got that you want to put out there. We'll start up top with David. Anything that you want to plug?